Are we recording or no?
Yeah, right as you said that, we started recording.
Hey
Hi,
guys,
everyone.
it's the official One Piece podcast featuring none other than Oda Sensei himself.
Holy
Oh,
shit.
it's me.
It's a me,
Oh
Oda
no.
Sensei.
How fucking dare you? You're you're both scum.
I ran out of podcasts to pretend to be.
So you throw Oda under the bus with a Mario voice? This is where you go?
Is that not what he sounds like?
No.
Oh, this is not Italian?
Oda doesn't really speak. He just hides out and makes dope ass manga. Hey, actually, that's really topical. 'Cause that's the first thing we're gonna talk about. But first, my name is Willer. I'm your host.
My name's Bradley,
I'm Joe.
Okay.
and together we are the Powerpuff Girls.
I could.
Can I be the blue
I'm
one?
Bubbles. No,
No,
Joe.
Willer, that's not fair.
That's really unfair, Joe. I can't believe
No,
you
it's
did
not.
this.
It's not fair. You get to be Bubbles.
Fine. I'll be
I'll be
Buttercup.
the weird purple one they made in a
No,
lab
wait.
who
You know
was all
what? Thinking
mutated.
about it, if anyone's going to be Bubbles, it's Bradley.
Yeah, I guess so. Joe,
Yeah.
you're like straight up Blossom. Like that is your personality.
Joe, you are Blossom. You're the manager of the team.
Yeah.
That's true.
Which leaves me with Buttercup, the
Because
badass one.
you're the fighting gamer, and Buttercup is a fighter.
Also, very ironic considering my opinions on redheads.
Yes, very. Well, let's not tank the podcast quite yet. That comes later this episode. But
I hope this is our first detour is called is our Powerpuff Girl talk.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Powerpuff Girl Z,
I
more
mean, no, that isn't that bad.
It's not good, but it's
Powerpuff
not
Girls are
terrible.
great. I don't know what you're talking about. But
No,
anyways, One
Powerpuff
Piece.
Girl Z is bad, isn't it?
I
Oh,
don't think it's
the
bad,
new
but I
one.
don't think it's good either. Like, I wouldn't ever recommend it to anybody
Yeah,
in
Okay.
the world.
I thought you were talking about.
No, that's one of the best cartoons of all
OG Powerpuff? You know what? Fuck everything we had on the schedule. Powerpuff Girls podcast right now.
time. I mean, look,
No,
we
we
can
need
do
a
it.
whole-
We
we
can do
need
a
a whole
quickie.
week.
All right.
We got a plan for that one.
It doesn't deserve a quickie. It deserves more.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
But instead, let's talk about something undeserving, like One Piece Drum Island arc. Well,
Hell yeah.
To be
finally,
accurate, part
yeah,
of it.
I jumped in there. To kind of clarify what we're going to be talking about this week. Last week we finished Little Garden
That's
Yeah.
correct.
with the big old giant boys. We love them so much. They're our best friends.
I wish.
And now we're moving into the Drum Island arc, which I've always heard a lot about. So far, as always, it does not disappoint. I made it this week up to arc, whatever. I made it up
Oh,
to chapter 140. That is, I finished chapter 139, titled "Enter Tony Chopper."
Hey,
I don't want
um,
to enter my boy.
The legend, which we'll get to talk about him.
you
I've
also
been-
got the cover art with the JoJo's reference. But yeah, we'll get to that
Wait,
when we get
really?
there. Yeah,
I didn't know
there's
about
a
this.
there's a part where like Django's taking his glasses off, and the sound effects is go, which is the sound effect they use in JoJo's for menacing.
Ooh,
The go.
Yeah,
epic.
Cool.
I've been loving our Django things in the middle.
Django's so fun. All right,
It's been
Bradley.
very good.
Let's jump to the start of this arc. Your thoughts?
So, I'll kind of do the chronological walk through the arc, which I feel like is what we usually do. We start off and like I always take notes when I read, and I always find that it only takes a few pages into my reading before I start taking notes on stuff I like. Pretty much immediately after we leave Little Garden, Nami gets sick, and I think she's actually getting sick as they are sailing away. And man, Oda, we've talked about it before, how Oda does such a good job at showing how necessary every member of this crew is, like especially in combat, when it comes to gathering information, stuff like that. Even the likes of Usopp, he's had his moments where he got to be the hero. And man, like when Nami gets sick, you really realize how necessary she is. Shit just falls apart. They don't know where they're going. They wouldn't have known this fucking cyclone was gonna kill them. Like everyone kind of has some kind of crisis where they need her on the boat, and she's kind of out of commission. And I just like that Oda always takes these moments to remind us that, like, nobody here is a fluff character. Like, we need all of these people.
I think Nami in particular is just so important. Like,
Yeah, they would have never even got here without her.
Yeah, I think she's like arguably the most or second most important character of the crew outside of combat.
I think her and one other character that comes up later.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like without her they can't sail, and if you can't sail,
Mm-hmm.
how are you gonna be pirates?
You're not. You're just gonna die.
You're just gonna die.
Okay,
It's that meme.
So-
I guess I'll just die.
I guess I'll just die.
so Nami being sick, it kind of throws a hitch into our plan of, okay, we need to go to Alabasta right away, but it's kind of a trade-off, right? Because it's like, okay, we know we have the log post for Alabasta, we could sail there right now, but it might actually take longer to get there if we don't take a detour and get Nami healed. So we're like, you know what? Yeah, we're gonna go save Nami.
And
so we
reading
need-
through this with you, I really like how Vivi handles this as well.
Mm-hmm.
That was really
Yeah.
important. You probably have some notes on that.
like she really like has to the entire crew. This was kind of a hard call to make, right? Because
Yeah.
this is the most important thing to them right now. They have to get her back to her kingdom. They have to get Baroque works off their back. They really can't afford to slow down, but they can't afford not to slow down either. It's really
And Vivi,
really
like, she gets a newspaper on this same day where it's like, oh, things are getting even worse every day in Alabasta. So the fact that she's like, you know what, we need Nami well. That's the only way we could really win this ultimate goal. And like, that's really cool of her that already this fast, she's already making these sacrifices for her temporary pirate friends.
Yeah, and man, like I was thinking as I was reading this stuff, I just from what I know about the series as a whole, I don't think Vivi is one of the permanent members of our crew, but damn, she feels like it, man. Especially like in this arc, she really feels like one of the boys.
She's one of the boys for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a hot
Um,
boy.
There's a great panel here, just to interject for a hot second. That's a great joke where like it's like the second page. They're sitting around. They have like Nami in a cot, and Vivi's like she's like, this is awful. She's getting a cold. It might be because of climate. Is there anyone here that might know anything about medicine? And it's just a blank panel with everyone just pointing at Nami.
Oh yeah.
She is so abundantly important to the crew. It is really nice to see.
And she provides another role in that she kind of is like the whip cracker of the crew.
Yeah.
And so like you can definitely tell that if like Vivi wasn't there, they'd probably be like, I don't know what to do, and like everything just really would have gone to hell. So Vivi like steps up for that role and really shows like that leadership side of her.
That's true. That's a good point.
Yeah.
All right. So from there, obviously they decide we gotta save Nami's life. So we're gonna sail around. We're gonna find an island. We gotta find people. We gotta find a doctor. They soon come across a. Okay, I was about to say they come across the island. First, they come across
Some fucking losers.
yeah, idiot loser. Okay? I feel like I'm gonna butcher this pronunciation like I did Lugetown, Roogetown, Logtown.
We don't
I'm
talk
sure
about
people were
that.
mad about that.
Yeah.
Wapole?
Wapple.
Wapple? There you go.
Wapple. Like
I'm glad we clarified that. Wapple,
get that out
Wapple
of
of Tin, who Luffy just beats the shit out of. Like it's like holy, oh my god.
You're missing
and
my favorite part of this chapter where they meet his archer man just standing out in the middle of the
that's
ocean.
a good visual gag as well.
Yeah.
Oh man, it really was. And chess, I think, is very cool.
Boy, it sure is cold today. And like there's like basically 3 or 4 pages of very minimal, no dialogue about that. I just want to clarify. There's a total of like 6 speech bubbles from the time like they see him to the time the ship rises up. So
It's just a strong visual gag in general.
yeah.
Oh, like it was really cool watching that ship rise up. And then like we quickly learned that Wapple
Yeah.
There you
is
go.
he's a devil fruit user with the munch fruit. Doesn't help him a whole lot in this fight. Luffy just launches him out to sea.
Well,
Which in this
darn.
moment you're like, oh, what a chump. But I think that's going to make the turnaround of later in this arc when we see what he can really do that much more surprising.
Mm-hmm.
So after they are dispatched, we come to a snowy island, which would be Drum Island.
Mm-hmm.
And these people really are not happy to see the Straw Hats. They don't like pirates because they've recently had kind of their lives ruined by pirates.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's right. There's another.
Did they, Joe? Have they talked about that yet, or is that later in the arc?
That might be later near the end of the arc. I'm
Okay.
going through it as we go through it, so I'll let you know.
I'll just keep going chronologically, and we'll see.
Yeah,
Sure.
you keep going.
So, Luffy pretty much immediately is like, "Hey, we need to save my friend's life. Let us on the island. We need a doctor. These people don't like pirates. They're aiming guns." And this, this really angers Luffy. He's like, "We don't have time. We need to save Nami." And they shoot at the Straw Hats, and Luffy's about to fight them. And then we get to probably one of my favorite character moments in One Piece so far.
Damn.
Is this quick exchange between Vivi and Luffy, and it's only like 2 sentences. But going into it, I want to say I've talked a lot about, like, man, how much I love Luffy as a character and where he's at. Just like where he already is, where he's established as a character is great. But we haven't gotten to see a ton of development yet. But this arc is going to have a lot of Luffy development. It's in some ways it's subtle, in some ways it's in your face, but it's all good. So Luffy is like very brash. He's very aggressive against these people. Like, let us on your fucking island. We need to save my friends. And Vivi stops him, and she just straight up says, "Luffy, you're a failure as a captain," which is a huge oh shit moment, because you can imagine how much those words would hurt someone like Luffy, like specifically Luffy. But like after a really quick deliberation, he realizes that she's right. He was letting his pride and his brashness get in the way of priority number 1, which is getting these people to help Nami. Like, this is kind of a first in some way, because we've talked before about how Luffy kind of always knows what needs to be done when it comes to people before the reader does. Like, with Nami's room at Arlong Park, he immediately knew, like, oh man, I need to tear this room down. Or with Laboon, he's like, I need to box this whale. Like, this is what they need. And this is the first time I think that what he thought was the right way to handle things was actually probably not the right way to handle things.
I like that. Like, as much of an emotional mastermind as Luffy is, he isn't without his faults, and he can reassess himself and be like, you know what? Yeah, okay, we'll go with something else then.
Yeah, I just like that, he's still human and he's still going to make these mistakes. But even in this moment, he still kind of has that emotional maturity that we usually praise him for, because he's mature enough to quickly realize that he fucked up and that he was wrong, and he adjusts his attitude and his behavior. So Luffy is like this perfect combination where he's simultaneously the most childish character in One Piece, but also like the most mature character in One Piece.
Oh,
and
man.
I don't know how Oda pulls that off, but he does.
Oh man,
It's crazy.
good things coming.
So man, like, I just really liked that that exchange between Vivi and Luffy, and this is kind of gonna be a moments like this are kind of gonna be a recurring thing as we go forward, where Luffy's instincts and the way he would normally tackle a situation isn't necessarily the right thing to do. But I'll get to those moments when I get there. So we kind of move in and we learn more about the island, about the king leaving, about how there's only one doctor, and I won't really talk about a ton of this stuff because a lot of it is just like moving the plot forward, getting characters where they need to be. Zoro goes for a swim, and man, I totally forgot about him until he showed up again.
Yeah, he's sitting this one out.
But I thought the timing was perfect whenever he does get back in the picture. Um,
One
so yeah,
one thing I really like that you just mentioned is they're looking for a doctor and they come to the place with the most doctors ever, but they just got there where none of the doctors are available now.
yeah, this is like, it was at one point like the most medical sciencely advanced island in the world. I butchered whatever that phrase I was trying to say was, but
It was something.
like at one point this would have been the place to go if you had a sick person.
Yeah.
And just by a few months they missed all these doctors.
Bummer.
So, but there is one doctor, and Luffy is like, okay, we got to go see this doctor, who is the old hag. She's getting up there, but she has some secret to her young skin, I'm sure, that she's itching to tell people.
Oh yeah.
So Luffy sets out with Sanji to carry Nami up the mountain, and this sets up for a lot of really good moments. Obviously, obviously everyone in the Straw Hats is concerned for each other's safety, but you know Sanji is like, Nami is my first and second and third and fourth and fifth priority.
Yeah.
And Luffy really cares about her too. But he's still having some of these moments where he is briefly forgetting what the big priority is, because these big rabbits, lupins,
Yeah.
I think they're called.
Lapons maybe? I don't know.
I'll just call them rabbits or
Yeah.
labbits, whatever.
No, not Labbits,
Rabbit.
please. Luge Town.
Yeah, the big rabbits show up, and Luffy is like, okay, well, obviously we're just gonna fight them, right? Because that's what you do in One Piece. You fight the enemies when they show up. But Sanji stops Luffy, and he's like, you're doing it again. Like, you can't forget Nami. She's the most important thing right now. And with both these rabbits and later with Wapol, Luffy kind of just has to dodge instead of fight, which I feel like goes very against his instincts.
But
And
it
I
does
think I think it's interesting to see Luffy kind of struggle with this.
This whole setup with Luffy and Sanji going up the mountain is probably like it's one of my favorite things of One Piece you've gotten to so far, where on one hand you have like Luffy and Sanji are like cracking jokes and making small talk early in the journey, and like I feel like this is just a really good bonding moment where it's just the two of them taking care of Nami and their personalities bouncing off of each other with a goal on like Luffy's back that makes the action a little more interesting. Just overall really good.
Yeah, it really is a good sequence, because like there's nothing like in the several pages where that's kind of going on, like the very first part of the trip, there's nothing like bombastic going on. You're right, like they're just kind of talking back and forth, and like this is One Piece, so it's really entertaining.
Yeah, they're like One Piece characters don't always get to just have a moment where they're shooting the shit,
Yeah.
so to say. So it's really good when they do.
Yeah, and Oda's just a very naturally funny person, so anything characters are saying in those moments is usually really nice.
Them dodging the rabbit while they're just continuing on their conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah, they really
that's
do.
fun.
They just don't give a fuck.
And Sanji's just like fucking.
Yeah, it's like it takes like a couple attacks before Sanji even considers it.
They're holding a conversation. This rabbit's just happening in the background, and then you just get pissed off of it. It really kind of just shows like Sanji's like a really cool person. Like he's pretty level-headed, but he has that breaking point and just can just knock it out. I feel,
Yeah.
which is very opposite of Zoro, where I feel like Zoro can be very hot-tempered at times, but then cools down as things continue forward. I think
So Sanji explodes while Zoro internalizes.
Yeah, Zoro becomes more focused.
Zoro seethes while Sanji
Yeah.
explodes.
Because Sanji's gonna yell, but like with Zoro, like at the end of Little Garden, he took out all that anger and he's like, I need to just train all night.
Yeah.
And like it really says a lot about Oda, how all these different characters handle the same emotions in very different ways. So they continue their trip up the mountain. Very, very short thing I'll talk about. It's not huge, but I still enjoyed it, so I took a note on it. Is where Luffy, obviously they are dodging, not hitting the big rabbits. After the avalanche, there's a little one, and its mother's trapped in the snow, and Luffy pulls it out. They're very grateful. And then later on, these rabbits come to the rescue for Luffy and them, which I feel like some people out there are like, oh, cliche friendship shit. And I'm like, I mean, it is, but
Nah, it's
I really
cute.
don't care.
It's cute. It's cute as shit. I don't care what anyone says.
It really is. And like One Piece just like exemplifies friendship, I think.
Oh,
like
yeah.
holy like I really like it.
A big thing about One Piece is like taking the kindness someone does to you and passing it on and just kind of keep going with that.
Yeah.
I feel.
You're totally right. Like what Luffy did with these rabbits is what he does with, I feel like, pretty much everyone's life that he touches. Like they see this person that Luffy is, and I don't know, he changes them on fundamental levels, and they don't all change in the same way, but
it's almost like a secondary ability where he makes friends and allies very naturally.
friend fruit.
Yeah.
Friend fruit is a secondary fruit. The avalanche sequence I just think is just really good. The tension is nice.
Yeah.
Like the decisions to like I think Sanji has like a little self-sacrifice moment here.
Yeah, he breaks his back saving Luffy and Nami.
Yeah, he kicks them away, and then like Luffy tries to grab him and just gets the glove. That's just raising the tension of this. What started off like a pretty chill hike up the mountain. Now Nami is dying and Sanji is dying.
Yeah.
An avalanche just happened. A little bit before this, there was one other thing that I was noticing. This is your first encounter with a different type of devil fruit called a Zoan fruit.
Ooh.
Where you notice that... Yeah, Dalton before this turns into a bison.
Oh yeah, they did mention the word Zoan.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it said it's a fruit of the Zoan family.
So thoughts on that? So he turned into a bison man.
Yeah, so I was even kind of thinking about this, how it differs between other kinds of devil fruits we saw, because it's not... It's like transformative, but it's not transformative in the same way that the Gum Gum fruit or the Munch Munch fruit are.
Right.
I will need to see more of them, but
Oh man,
I mean, every fruit I've seen so far has been cool.
This is the big introductory arc to that kind of fruit.
Nice.
And-
I think because we got introduced to Luffy's a Paramecian,
Yeah.
right?
As you'll
And
find
then-
out in a bit.
Yeah. And then Smoker's
Logia.
Logia, yeah. And so like this is kind of like the final like fruit form, essentially. So I'm going through this with y'all, and you kind of skipped over a portion, Bradley, that I'm surprised about, which is the introduction of Dr. Curaria at the other town over.
You talked it a little bit.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Just
Because
like-
I just want to talk about real quickly that I fucking love her design.
Oh,
I
she
think
looks rad.
She's rad. She's so cool.
My favorite thing about her introduction, or really any time she's on screen, is just people will say like anything to her, and she's like, "Oh, you want to know the secret of why I look so young?"
Yeah.
It's a good gag. I just like how greedy she is, where she's like, "You remember this for the rest of your life," as she like runs away.
Yeah,
Good. I like that.
she is quite the character.
I believe this brings us to where Wapol confronts them right after Sanji's avalanche
Yes,
fall.
up on the mountain, and man, like Wapol is way less of a chump than he was a few chapters ago, because like the avalanche falls on the village, and his mouth becomes like half the size of the village. And
Oh, yeah.
he swallows his comrades so he can spit them out safe. And holy shit! And then he starts fighting Luffy, and he's able to like make his mouth become so big that Luffy mistakes it for a snowbank and almost runs into his mouth. Like, this is
Yeah.
man. I didn't think the Munch Munch fruit would be this cool, but I'm also not surprised because it's Oda. So
It's even cooler, but that secondary ability of just being able to stretch your mouth to that size, that's really cool.
yeah, it's just like it lets me realize that, man, I don't know, like Luffy's good, but maybe beating him again isn't going to be as easy as that first time.
A lot of killer action shots here, like Luffy dodging the arrows with like a sideways flip, and the Lapon showing up and just smacking the shit out of Chess and Marimo.
Oh yeah, I took a lot of pictures of panels I liked because I feel like every 2 or 3 pages in One Piece, I'll take a picture of the page just because I love the art.
Ooh, I think this leads us to the big moment for me of this section that we're in. Like probably my favorite, like I was saying, my favorite moment of One Piece you've reached to, which is Luffy climbing the mountain.
Oh my gosh! Like I got goosebumps. Like Luffy is busting his ass.
Oh yeah.
Like by the time he gets to the top, his fingers are bleeding and he passes out. And we've seen how much stamina Luffy has. Like for this trek to do that to him is just a monument to how impressive of a feat this is.
It's absolutely inhuman. Like when he drops Sanji and he has to stretch his head back to grab him.
Like you could, oh man, I could feel that in my neck, man. Like Luffy really busts his ass here, and like I was gonna say, like Luffy will really go the extra mile, extra 10 miles for his friends, which like not that he hasn't before, like he always does, but man,
this is something like. Because the moment where he reaches up is like such a serene moment too, where he sees the castle on top of the mountain. That's a really good 2-page spread.
That 2-page spread. That's another picture I took. Holy crap!
That's fucking gorgeous.
That was a beautiful drawing.
And then he's like, "That's a pretty castle," and then just passes out.
Yeah, that whole climb sequence, like everything in this arc has just been making me love Luffy more. I feel like each arc, I love all the characters in every arc, but I feel like each arc kind of has like 1 or 2 it'll focus on more than the others.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, kind of get to jump around from like Zoro to Nami.
Yeah.
Each arc gets to build on a character.
Yeah, and I feel like we've really come back around to Luffy.
Hey Joe, what you giggling about over there?
Bradley, did you read chapter 139 or did you just stop like right at it?
I read through chapter 139. I stopped right before.
So I'm on the second page, and it's the picture of Usopp with it's from not Nami, from Vivi, fucking Vivi.
Oh yeah.
He's just like, why is my face all swollen?
It's frostbite. Yeah, frostbite. That's so cute. Wait, we're not gonna comment on Django's hard eyes.
Yeah,
hard eyes, motherfucker.
We're gonna comment. I was really ready to see what his genius disguise would be, and
it's just taking off his things.
It's pretty genius.
We glossed over, but Chopper grabbing Luffy there, very nice.
Yes, that's I think.
Yeah,
Chopper is.
Oh man, Zoro recognizing Usopp just from the nose.
Yeah. But yeah, so this chapter, I have always heard of Tony Chopper. He's kind of one of the mascots of the series.
Yeah.
But you know, I've known nothing about him. I didn't know what was the deal with this guy. So far, in true One Piece fashion, I like him. He's very. Obviously, I don't know a ton about him right now, but he's funny. He's different. He has something we really need to bring to the crew, and he came at the perfect time story-wise.
What is this something? Being emergency food supplies?
Yeah. Well, you know, venison in the winter.
Very good. I really like his hiding technique of hiding opposite, on the entryway.
Yeah, and that's probably the most personality we get to see out of him in this chapter, but I think it says all you really need to know.
He's just a fucking weirdo, and he's cute.
I think him doing that's a good like representation of like who he actually is as a character.
Yeah, you get a good read
because he's kind of cowardly, but he wants to do things like
yeah.
But man, looking at this old Chopper is kind of sort of weird.
Yeah, this is some nightmare fuel.
Yeah,
like Chopper's design changes a lot over time.
It does. It becomes
which makes sense too, because he can kind of change form or whatever. But
yeah,
Chopper like kind of give you some pretense. Bradley to me is like one of those characters that can be very. He's a lot like Luffy, where you can kind of like misjudge him, but like he can come in clutch at some very crucial points
Oh
in
yeah.
the story. I'm very excited. He's
And
he's a cool
man,
dude.
one really cool thing with this chapter that I didn't really expect is I had always seen this character on merchandise and stuff, but I've only ever seen him in like the default small reindeer form. I didn't know he had a devil fruit or that he could like go big and awesome.
Yeah, when he
Uh,
grabbed Luffy there, it was shadowed out, but that was clearly him in big form.
yeah, that was a big surprise for me, and I just thought it was very cool. The human fruit, it's very awesome.
Right. So you might be
It's kind of
wondering what happens if a human eats the
That was the
fruit?
first thing I thought. Yeah.
Well, in an what are they called?
SBS.
SBS. Oda said that they just become enlightened, whatever that means. So that'd be kind of a shitty deal.
I want the human fruit. I want to be.
Willer, what if what if One Piece was a human fruit, but Chopper ate it?
That'd be great.
It's like we gotta kill Chopper, I guess.
Chopper fruit.
Yep.
I really like Luffy, like half dead, half unconscious, telling Carrera to fix his friends. Very cute.
Yeah.
And man, I never knew what this character even was. He's a blue-nosed reindeer. That's fun.
Yes.
But we end the chapter with the reveal that he is the human fruit user, and that's where I left off for this week. But man,
I think this might be the halfway point. I think this arc is like 2 volumes, and I'm pretty sure you read one.
yeah, that was about 1 volume worth.
I think coming up is then you and I's favorite part of
This arc.
this. Yes.
Beyond that, I think from this point on, this arc is just straight up banger after banger. Like,
Yeah.
it already starts good. This is the even better half.
The entire manga's just been banger after banger.
Yeah.
I suppose
This
that's
is, I
true.
think, the first like hard hitting like emotional event, like pretty hard hitting emotional event in One Piece.
I mean, you're just
been a
gonna do
lot of
Nami like
really
you're
Oh, yeah,
gonna.
that's Nami, but like this is one that like kind of really.
This one fucks me up, fam. Anyways, that's One Piece for today.
That is One Piece. Very cool.
Thank you for joining us, Bradley, with your lovely insight as always. Well, you're not going anywhere, but thank you for joining us.
Hello, welcome to Joe's Video Game Corner. My name is Joe.
Hi, Joe. Why don't you tell us about your students?
Yes, so I picked up Fire Emblem Three Houses kind of like when this first got announced. I was really like, oh, I really didn't see the appeal for it. Like I've played other Fire Emblem games, but like the Harry Potter-esque school setting, I just kind of really wasn't buying with it. I thought it was kind of lame. And then as more information came out, I was just like, oh, I like this idea. I like this idea a lot. And I've been playing it now on and off for like the past week. I think I've probably put in like 10 or 15 hours into it by now. And I really like it. It might be one of my favorite like methods of leveling up and having characters develop in a game so far. Like it's really cool.
So you make like lesson plans or something? What's
Yeah,
going on there?
The story of Fire Emblem Three Houses is basically you're a mercenary. You're the daughter or son of what used to be the captain of like the knights at this monastery / school officer school, and there's some complicated backstory, but the gist of it is you and your dad go back to that monastery, and they're like, well, since you're here, we have an open like teacher position. Why don't you take it so you can earn some money and teach these kids because you're really good at what you do. And at the beginning of the game, you have to pick one of the 3 houses: the Black Eagles, the Blue Lions, and the Golden Deers.
Which one did you pick?
I picked the Black Eagles because it had a girl with a hat.
Okay, right. You've talked a lot. Can you send us a picture of this girl with hat?
Yes. I will send you a picture.
Which one has
Okay, but going on.
But going on, yes. So what happens is it goes by like every month at the beginning of the month you have like a teachers meeting with the head of the monastery and the head of the school. They're like, all right, so this month we need you and your students to be ready to take out a bandit camp that's like down the road, or we need you and your students are going to be taking part of like a mock siege battle with the rest of the houses, and so you need to get them ready for that. endeavor. Uh, it really usually so far like all the missions I've seen have been very much just like, oh, just kill everybody or rout the enemy. Very classic Fire Emblem missions.
Sounds like
With
fun school activities.
yeah, but the big element here is you. So like, okay, I have to get them ready. So you then have to make lesson plans each week for what your students are going to do, and by the end of that week, when they complete your lesson plan, that it levels up their skills, and you have to look at not only like what your students are good at, but like what you're missing in your roster. So like the house I chose is very magic focused and very damage dealing focused, and so it's missing a lot of that heavy tanky class. So I have to like find a character and kind of mold them more into like this health orientated like tank class that can kind of be like a sturdy frontliner, or like I basically had to like scratch make cavalry units for my house because there was no one there that had any like horse skill abilities and cavalry abilities, so I had to like level them up over time.
That
Um,
seems really fun, actually.
yeah, and so what ends up happening is, so you have to make lessons plans, and then at times your students will come up to you like, "Hey, I really don't like studying this. Can I study this instead?" Or I read a book about this. I really want to be this class, and then they you have to prove, you have to like tell them yes or no about what they want to do, and which can affect their motivation for how they like for their instructions later in the week. You assign characters on group projects that will also increase their skills in those in certain abilities or certain classes or skills, but also increase their like connection and bond with each other, which is really cool. It's just it feels like all those things they give you, they like it feels like, oh, I'm really like a teacher that's like making like, oh, you're going to be studying axes and horses, you're going to be studying axes and heavy armor, you're going to be working on this, you're going to be working on this, and then you have like and then you have to, so outside of that you have to explore the monastery with your students and talk to them and make sure they have good motivation for the upcoming week. So like you might take them out to dinner and have dinner with them, or you might you know, go to church with them, sing choir class, or you might give them advice on some sort of like problem they're having with their daily life. And you have to like, but in order to do that, you really have to know what these characters are by paying attention to their dialogue and looking at their profile sheets. Because if you don't do things correctly, you've kind of wasted time with them. And so as a professor, you only have so much time during these off days to get their motivation up. So you like, for example, you only have like I only have 4 activity points, which means I can only interact with, I can only do like 4 activities, which basically means I can only choose 4 students to really up their motivation like directly. Everything else has to be done through like stuff on the battlefield.
And then, of course, you're playing classic mode, so the students you invest in might die, which is interesting.
Yeah, they have a mechanic that I think has been there since Fates or something. I don't remember because I didn't play it. But basically, you can like rewind time like a few turns. You have like 3 charges of this per battle. It's really helpful and very useful, especially when like you're doing everything right, and then like it's just like, oh, that attack that was supposed to kill this guy just happened to miss, and then he counterattacked and did a critical hit and just killed your student, and you're like, oh, hold on, just time out. It kind of helps that like that randomness like tone it down a bit.
Yeah, it just bites the dust them.
Yeah. So I'm really enjoying it. I'm enjoying it a lot more. I feel more invested in these students as well. The other thing I didn't talk about too is you can steal characters from other houses as well. If you
Ooh.
can prove to that, like, hey, I'm really good at this ability. You and me, we're tight. We hang out all the time. I take you to dinner like every other week or something like that. Like, come join my house, and they'll leave their house and join your squad instead.
So you could theoretically get everyone in one house, or
I
like I'm sure there's a limit to it, but like you could have a
Yeah.
house with any number of the other house's characters.
Theoretically, I think so, yeah, because there's a new game plus mode that you'd be able to, because you
Mm.
can go back and you like carry over, I think, your stats and your like professor level, and so you're able to like go back and like, all right, cool, I can just recruit all these characters immediately that from my other house that I played, so I know I have a better baseline for this.
So
You, Yeah.
I have a question, Joe. Do you know how many hours you've put in so far, more or less, so we can get a
I don't know
gauge?
how to check on the Switch.
It takes 10 days before the Switch gives you, but maybe the game has like on the save file I can tell you, but either
Oh,
way,
you're probably right on the save file thing.
yeah,
Uh,
with these RPG style games.
I've been really playing like between like during on lunch and stuff. Like, I haven't been able to like sit down and play for like a long period.
hmm Either way, you seem to be having a good time because like when this game was first announced, I was super not into it. The
Hmm.
Mostly because of the visuals. I really dislike the visuals of this game. I've come around on the character designs. I've seen some good ones,
Yeah.
but Bradley always says like, "Oh man, Fire Emblem has such S tier character designs." And like some of that was lacking, but like now that I've seen a lot more of them, oh, there's
And
Hat Girl.
and you know what, man? Like, I'm glad to hear a lot of this stuff because, kind of like Willow, like when the game was first announced, I was like, I'm not entirely sure about it. A big deal for me was like, how is this going to be better or different than other Fire Emblems? And like, holy shit, this entire house system changes everything.
Yeah, it seems like the mechanics around combat are 100% better than anything they've come up with. Also, they removed the weapon triangle, right? So it's like even more specialized.
Yeah, they did a lot. So it used to be like, for example, magic was like a book you gave a magic class, and then
Right.
that book had so many charges. Now that class just learns spells, and they only bring so many charges into the battlefield that I think is based off another stat. I'm not really sure because I haven't dug really that deep into the stat system. But I think it's a much better change because that's one thing that's infuriating. Is like, oh, my sword broke. Well, shit.
This
They also did. They've also included some new things into the combat words. Like, you have combat arts, which are essentially like special moves, like that you can use. Like, generally unlock the generic like power attack move that just deals more damage,
mhm.
and then eventually you get like specialized moves. Like, my character has like a monster breaker move that deals more damage to monsters than anything
So
else.
like they made it more Final Fantasy Tactics because I've played Fates and I've actually been wanting to play it some more just to get back into it. But it's like, oh, it's pretty simple because you just kind of move units and you attack and you can kind of pair up units and there's some healing stuff. But like in general, your unit has a very few limited amount of things it can do. But I feel
Yeah.
like with this new system, it feels more like Tactics or Disgaea, where each unit actually has like a little more variety in its moves.
I think the big thing about this game is like, because so in other Fire Emblem games what usually happens is you're going along the story and you just meet people, and like, you can join us and you can join us and you can join us, and they
Yeah,
just
it's kind of
come,
jarring.
yeah, and they kind of just come with their classes. But in this game, everyone starts off as like the basic commoner or noble class, and then you're like, all right, I gotta work you up to a fucking mage. So here's your lesson plan.
And,
And you're like, and you when
and
I've been doing,
you're doing this based on their stats and personality and stuff, right? Like
yeah,
you have to find
bring
who's gonna be who.
yeah, you bring up whenever you plan your lesson plans for people, they'll bring up their list of like, here's everything that they like, here's everything they don't like, and then additionally another thing is, here are all the things that you're a higher rank in than them, so they'll level up faster because you're a higher rank in that
Hmm.
skill than them because you know more about
Makes
it.
sense.
Yeah,
Man, I really want to get this. So, like I was saying, like the visuals weren't doing anything for me. It has the Pokemon problem where it has like some good art design, but some of the textures look god awful. Like
Yeah.
these two games are so clearly 3DS games, but like these systems are hard to pass up.
yeah. I think character to character, I think they look great, especially like when you're in that monastery. The monastery looks awesome. It's a cool place to run around in. It
Nice.
uh, I love what they've done with it because they do two things. They've done some things that make two things about these open world hub things that make really annoying when you have to go talk to a bunch of characters. Which is, one, there's a bunch of fast travel locations to each section of the monastery, and there's no restriction on it, so you just pop around everywhere you need to go, so you're not like running around with your head cut off, like getting lost.
Hmm.
And two, when you highlight over each of those sections, it tells you what character is there, and then you can highlight over that character name and it tells you exactly where on the map they are in that area.
That's
So like,
cool.
yeah, so you're just like, oh, thank God, here's where this person is. I need
Here's
to
where
go get,
Hat Girl is, so I can go flirt
yeah,
with her.
basically. Uh,
Basically.
but yeah, there's this. It feels so much more like, okay, here's my free time day off. I need to really make sure I do, because I kind of have this anxiety where I'm like, did I talk to everyone that I need to, or all my the one thing I have is there's a motivation kind of bar, and that motivation bar determines how how much you can privately tutor that person during like the
Mm.
beginning of your week. So like it's like you get it's basically like 100, and for every 25 you can teach them a lesson or something like that. It's hard to like really explain. But basically you can only teach them as much as they are motivated. So you're like, all right, I need this. I want this person to get to the next class, but they need to have this rank of this skill. So I need to talk to them so they're motivated, so I can teach them and make sure they level up this week, basically. Um,
Sounds
it's
cool.
yeah, and I I feel like there's just so much more control when it comes to like leveling up the skills of your team compared to other Fire Emblem games, because a lot of the other Fire Emblem games were just like you get in the battle and then you fight and then you get some skill points and then you kind of just like you're eventually getting to a point where that skill levels up, whereas this one feels like you have much more control. And like when the student is lagging behind in their skill that they're supposed to specialize in, you're like, oh man, that's my fault. I wasn't being a good enough teacher and wasn't paying attention to the student enough to
Oh,
Joe's
that is
bad.
pretty cool.
yeah.
I'm sure we're gonna talk about this game more because like eventually I'm definitely going to pick this up. I think
Yeah,
now.
I
Do you think you'll do more than one house story? Because like there's 70 to 80 hours, so that seems fun, but it seems like it'll take me like 3 years, which I'm fine with. I take games slow, but like damn, that's a lot of content.
I think so. It's kind of interesting because they've hit this weird, like, perfect scenario where it's like I feel like there's enough time between missions that like it takes a while to get to a next mission, but at the same time, I feel like I'm really still like going at a good pace when it comes to things.
Hmm.
Like I feel like right now I'm getting closer to like the climax of the first part of this game, because the first part of this game is you at school, and then there's a 5 year time skip I don't know anything
Right.
about. Then there's a time skip in the war. So I'm very curious to see what that time skip is like and how like what we have now is going to
I
translate
think
to
that's
that.
that badass cutscene that they showed. That shit was
Yeah,
dark.
and
The story seems pretty good, yeah.
yeah, I told you about this, but there was like I've been like you have your head household, and like I leveled up my head household person like to I think B rank, maybe it was just C rank, but like everything's fine. Then I talked to this person, she told me like here's why I'm very like reserved about these things, and she tells you like, oh my god, that's fucking horrible.
Great.
Yeah, you're like awesome. This is like the one thing about Fire Emblem games that I really wish they went for a more M rating for them, because they're really dark stories and it's kind of jarring when
I
you
was
have
gonna
these.
say, do they touch on the fact that this is a school of killers? Like
Yeah,
they gotta address that, right?
the very first mission you go on is to go kill some bandits, and like Edelgard, who's like my head house leader, has been like fighting and been in training all of her life, so she's always been kind of like uh okay with it because she's supposed to be the next empress of this kingdom. So she's already had a battle or two. But like all the other characters, whenever they first kill somebody, they're just like, "Wow, I actually did that. I can't believe it," kind of
Good.
deal.
That okay. I'm really glad to hear that. Actually.
And there are some characters that are like, "Yeah, that was awesome," or that are basically
Okay.
psychopaths.
Well, fuck them.
Yeah, but like there's definitely like
I'm glad
there
there's
you have
variety there, though.
yeah, there's Bernadette, who's like the shy girl that like shuts herself in and doesn't want to like has a lot of trouble making friends, and like she kills somebody and she's like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I don't know, like I don't know, I want to go home.
Oh
uh
man,
yeah.
This sounds stellar, man. Oh man, I might break the bank. I really can't right now, but we'll see.
The writing in this game is superb. I really like the writing, and I'm like shocked because I'm not someone that usually gets invested in stories and
Oh,
characters.
Joe has said very controversial things about video game stories to me, and it's made me very angry. So hearing him say this is a really big deal, actually.
Yeah, because it's just like there are some characters like, man, I really want to see what the dynamic between these two are, or I want to know what this character is like, and like, man, I'm excited.
I think it's fascinating that they with the each individual story being so large, and I
Yeah.
watched like a review where it's like, oh, I immediately got a different perspective as soon as I started like a second house, and I'm like, oh, okay, they're gonna do this right, where like
Yeah,
each
I'm
story is
thinking
gonna enlighten you on something.
I think I've just reached the point now where the stories really start to diverge from each
Mm-hmm.
other. Like the first like few missions have been very much just like here are like the generic events that happened at the school that any of the houses could have tackled, but you just happen to do it because you're the main character. But now I think we're getting to the point now where we're going to see like where the roads start splitting off and things
Mm-hmm.
start becoming a little
With
bit.
that in mind, like they could have easily gone a Pokemon route where they
Mhm.
give you gold, blue, and whatever the other black, I think, and
Red,
like you red, and you could have bought each one. Um, but
yeah.
like the fact that they put all three of the 70-hour campaigns on one purchase, like that's actually really cool of them. They could have easily,
Mhm.
because with Fates, I had to buy both Birthright and Conquest, and I didn't finish either.
Yeah.
So it's like that's really cool that they would do that.
It's I'm very interested, especially because like I said before, the characters are so different, and like the just the, like the formation of each house is different. Like the Black Eagles, the one I have had is like half of them are magic users. The Blue Lions, most of them are melee fighters in like ground units, like foot soldiers.
Hmm.
The other one, the Golden Deers, is all archers basically.
I think I'm gonna go Blue Lions because blue's a cool color.
It is a
That,
cool color, but you know
that's
what
as
doesn't
far as I
have?
go. It doesn't
You know
have
what
Hat Girl. I know.
doesn't have Hat Girl?
I'll find
That's
some other girl. One thing I like is also they don't seem to be as like fan service like waifu-y this time around. Is that safe to
Mhm.
say? Like there's still some waifus that you can date, but like it's not like I felt like it was such a big part of the identity of the last two games.
I think there's like one character that's like kind of in that more of the. I think there's still a few that are very much more flirtatious, for sure. Like Dorothea, for example, is like a weird kind of flirt where she's just like, I just want to make sure I'm married by the time I'm 45.
Oh,
So she goes,
I mean that's fine. I mean
yeah.
that's
And
cool.
she's on like, but you talk to her, and she's just coming back from a date whenever you talk to her, basically. Um, but
Yeah.
then, but I feel like, yeah, I think it has to do with like them going to school, so they all wear school uniforms. I think that's a part of it. But no, I'm really enjoying it. I want to see more. I want to do more. I'm very excited. I just wish that yeah, I just the one thing I do have is sometimes I kind of get tired when there's just so many like dialogue scenes, but that was partially my fault because I opened up a window. I was like, oh right, I forgot to check on my supports and see how they've grown. And literally everybody had a connection to everybody else that had grown. I had to watch through every single cutscene. I think I had to watch like 45 minutes of cutscene before I was like, okay,
Yeah, you gotta pace yourself with that, or else like,
yeah,
especially it's not so bad in a story where you don't care a lot, but in a story where like you're invested in the characters, like no, I gotta pay attention.
yeah. Oh, I forgot to mention. So like the way you get classes is you have to have your students take a test, and you can have them take the test early, but that means they have a failure. They could possibly fail that test,
And that's a waste of
um,
time.
and it's a waste of time. Yeah, but like I think that's just a cool way of doing it, and it really just is like a nice thematic thing. But yeah,
Dude, time resource is my favorite overarching game
oh man,
mechanic. It's why I love Persona so much. I freaking love time management resource stuff.
yeah. This game's like fishing the game strategy wise. It's pretty great.
You know what? I think that's good for Fire Emblem because like we
No,
went
I agree.
deep,
I
but
think yeah,
I want to touch on this in the future.
yeah. I think this is the way that they should be doing. I don't know how they could do it again in like another series, but the fact that this feels like it has so much control about like how you're developing your army or your team that it doesn't feel like you're just getting random dudes. You know, like I just feel like I have a mishmash of like if like in previous like in Awakening, it felt like I just was gathering up an RPG party, but like was acting like an army. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like a really big RPG
Yeah.
party.
This feels like this feels like I'm getting my One Piece crew. But I get to like level up each one of them and specialize each one of them.
Make sure to give Nami her whatever her stick. You
I'm
know.
trying.
Um,
Yeah.
one other cool thing about it is that it feels less specific and complicated as the 4X games you usually play. It seems streamlined, which is what I think I
Yeah,
get
and I
into.
think part of that is because you're just so focused on just your
Your little squad.
your little squad, and I really like that a lot.
That's good.
Mhm.
All right, let's get out of here before we.
Anyways, go play Fire Emblem Three Houses if you have the money and have the time and the chance. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Every time I close my eyes. Let's talk about JoJo's Part 5, which just wrapped up in the anime.
Can I do a little preface here?
Please.
There's look, people.
Look. Oh, man.
There's gonna be a lot of words thrown around here. I just want to set the record straight. We all like Vento Oreo. We all like Part 5.
I want to set the record straight that JoJo's at its worst is still the best manga, like top 3 from me. Like
Exactly. That being said,
fuck Part 5. Okay, hold on. Let's back it up here. So Part 5 just wrapped up. I know we haven't done 3 or 4 because we jump all the way around, but now's the time to talk about it. It's very topical.
I want those clicks. I want those views.
I do want to preference too, like all things aside from Part 5, I think Part 5 is one of the best animated parts of this series. Like there are some fights you're just like, man, that looks gorgeous. Like the White Album fight was amazing to watch.
That was such a good one.
The 7-page Mudo was like animated beautifully.
Yeah, it was so hype. Aria Derchi was like so powerful.
Every good part of Part 5 and great part of Part 5 was done extremely well. There are even parts of Part 5 that I was just like, I really don't like this part. Like, especially like the final chapter or the final arc Part 5, I never was a huge fan of. The anime made me think like, oh man, I really like this now that I can understand it and see what's happening and really see it flow.
Mm-hmm.
I think David Productions did a great job in animating it. And just adapting it. And I was watching a video, and there's a lot of stuff that they streamlined and made more, that made a lot more sense.
Really?
Like they cut off a lot of egregious stuff. Like for example, like the first one is like Golden Experience getting pierced with the arrow at the very beginning of the part.
Right.
And that becoming the main plot point by the end.
Well, I've always in my head that's always been like he wasn't worthy yet. Like the stand arrow has a mind of its own since Part 4. So
yeah. But there's another one that's like super egregious, which is in Notorious B.I.G. You know how like Trish at first like they send it out the plane and then it comes back. In the anime, it comes back as like a little red dot that just happened to hold on to the wing, so it's able to like reform itself. In the manga, it's a fucking soccer ball that just bounces itself back up and then it's
oh, that's terrible. I forgot about that. Oh, Jesus.
Yo, can we never forget the part of the White Album fight where he reforms the disc?
Man, this is why we gotta start recording our viewing sessions because we lost our shit.
We were so dead.
Someone in the comments or email, roundaboutcast@gmail.com, or is it the roundaboutcast@gmail? Hold on. This is important.
Yeah. Classic Willer, not knowing the email address.
That's classic you, motherfucker. It's the roundaboutcast@gmail.com. Or on this video, please get back to us.
Subscribe.
What the fuck happened when White Album takes the disc that he was trying to get from the Joe Bros and he makes it vaporize in ice? What the fuck was that?
Please let us know. We've had our best people on this. We can't figure it out.
We've analyzed it. We put forensic scientists on it. We called Iraqi himself. He didn't give us any answers because
we stopped the episode while we were watching to go back through the manga, and we still couldn't figure it out.
It made it worse, if anything.
Anyways, okay. How do you guys want to handle this? Because this is our first JoJo part we've talked about, aside from 7, which we should have done this maybe for 7, where we have a lot of little arcs we can talk about. We could briefly go over our thoughts on each one, maybe.
I think I know. I'm pretty solid in my thoughts on Part 5. I don't know if you want to start there, but to me, Part 5 was great. I was I finished Part 4, like the anime. I was like, I'm gonna read Part 5 because I just have nothing else to do. I haven't read a manga in a long time. I'm gonna start reading JoJo's. I read Part 5, and like Part 5 to me, with some weird inconsistencies, was still amazing and great. All the way up until King Crimson shows up. And at that point, to me, it kind of loses its uniqueness and really falls into like this very safe structure that Iraqi already had done before and kind of kills off any potential plot lines that was set up and kind of any kind of tension that was set up previously. It feels like, oh, now we're just doing a classic shonen arc that you've already done before, kind of deal. That's my biggest gripe, is that there's a huge loss of potential in part 5 that was set up really early on, and it feels like it just kind of got really lazy at that halfway point, which is sad to say because it still has some of the best fights in the entire series. It just overall it just didn't feel as fulfilling as the beginning of it did.
Yeah, I don't know if I totally agree, because some of the best fights are after the halfway point.
No,
But I think the plot of part 5 is bad. I do not like the plot of it, and it really tanks halfway, like you said.
yeah, it's because we were introduced to this, and like it starts off like super strong. Like we're kind of stuck with this kind of like, oh my god, is Giorno gonna be good, bad? Like he's the son of Dio, but also Jonathan. It's this weird.
It's never relevant again.
Nope.
And it's never relevant again, which is I think is okay. Like the point is just being like, this is the excuse for this to take us away from this other like mainline JoJo's. But
JoJo's is so big into family ties, though. Like, to
I know.
completely disregard, it's in every single other part where, like, your family's really important to who you are and the lineage, and Giorno just goes off and does his own thing.
yeah, but I think it's a good break in this series too that we have this part 5 that's kind of like that's a break that's between like, okay, Josuke, which is like the bastard child of Joseph, and like Jotaro dealing with that and his family crisis with that, and then Jotaro dealing with his other family crisis with his daughter in jail. Like it's a nice break of like getting away from Jotaro and his whole family ordeal. So, but we still get to keep the
Except that Giorno could be done without Jotaro. Like, if there was just a few times where he reflects on what it's like to be the descendant of Jonathan as opposed to the descendant of Dio, and then that you could tie that into Trish and her family issues. But no, Trish is just kind of isolated with her dad.
Yeah.
And Giorno's lineage is never really important, and like that's a big waste of potential for me.
You
Go
could
ahead,
have had
Brandon.
both of them go through these arcs where they think about like who their fathers were and that they need like
And basically being abandoned.
but we just don't really.
Yeah, I think that's more of Araki. Like, I felt like really this part and a little bit of part 6, but I think mostly in this part, Araki was feeling the pressure of going week to week, because you can definitely tell like a stand does something, and then literally the next chapter does something completely different. Notorious Big being the most notorious of this, I think.
Yeah.
Oh,
and,
how
like,
about Gold Experience though?
that kind of thing?
Happened over time. Yeah.
That kind of thing with stands just totally changing. Like it's present in most of the parts that have stands, but like it's not nearly as prevalent in any of the others as it is here.
Yeah. So in a lot, yeah, it's, but like to me, like I feel like Araki was just writing more towards action to action to action. Like it felt like we're going from one action beat to the next action beat to the next action beat. Like there's kind of a loose follow through, but we're just moving from like action scene to action scene to action scene, and that works up until Mr. King Crimson, because when we're going to, is it Naples, Napoli? Where are we going to? Venice? We're going to Venice to drop off Trish. We have a destination point. Like we're following a trail to something. But then after that, we're kind of just like, I don't know, let's go here, and then maybe here, and then there just happens to be action there. There's not like a roadmap there like there is in Stardust Crusaders or in Steel Ball Run. Like we have a destination where we're going to. This feels like we're just kind of running around all over the place, and we're not really making progress until Araki decides to end the part. Because it's basically what happens is the team doesn't find anything out. They're basically just handed like, here's where you need to go by by the turtle.
No, you say his goddamn name.
Polnareff.
Do it for Polnareff Land.
Yeah, for Polnareff. Like he just literally calls them like, you need to go here, and then you go. They really don't figure anything out on their own.
But even like, I don't feel like the first half was that engaging either. So, like you're meeting the first like the crew, and you're getting. No, I guess that's why. That's why I think you might like it better, and I might even agree. Learning who the crew is and the staggering of learning their abilities, because they're all together from the start, but Araki stretches like in anime perspective, like 12 or 13 chapters worth of like slowly getting acclimated to the new crew.
And when you're introduced to the crew, they're introduced together, but their powers and their abilities are revealed one at a time, and it really sets up like, oh, these are the people that they're going to be working with, and this is like, and then eventually the best parts of this part I think are when you have team members teaming up with each other and comboing with each other doing their abilities. Like Jordan and Mista are the big ones to me because they have the best two fights, which is against
Yep, Green Day and White Album.
yeah, because they're able to combine their stands together and really work together, and that's so cool because I think that's the one unique thing to this part where like it really like they're literally using their stands together in a form.
They
The
also
other
have
one,
very high sexual tension.
yeah, yes. The other one, Mrs. like the all star this part. I feel because he's in all the best fights. He's in Grateful Dead. He's in he's in White Album. He's in Chocolate. He does some things at the very end too with like they're it's just the parts that make part five great are when they're able to bounce off of each other power wise, and you kind of get this great group dynamic of like this is why they work as a team, and this is why they're able to do great things. And then when they have to face that near the end, when they or like in the best fights are when they have to face that same kind of duo with the Grateful Dead and with Pet and with Beach Boy or with Chocolate and Oasis, and being able to like they're now facing stand powers that are able to combo with each other. So now they have to combo with themselves. Like that's what makes this part so great is it introduces this dynamic of combining our stands together to defeat other stands.
Yeah, it's not anything new, but it's executed quite well in this
Yeah,
part.
like and I think never not as much as it is in other parts. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, it barely happens in Stardust Crusaders. It happens a few times in
4 and 6,
yeah.
7. The main characters don't like their powers do not synergize,
Hmm.
so they're just kind of both fighting at the same time, if ever. Uh,
Yeah, but that's also like its own thing of
yeah,
that has its own merits of like becoming your own man kind of deal. But yeah, but the point here is like it you have that in the combat dynamics, but you never get that. I feel like in the character dynamics, like there's never a breathing room for the characters to sit
let's
down.
pause on the characters a bit because that's where my piece mostly comes in. Bradley, if you had to like voice your main likes and dislikes of Part 5, what do you think you'd break them down into?
Um, I guess I'll say strength wise, if you are into JoJo's for action, like this is the part for you. Like holy shit, lots of action, lots of really good action. This is like action the part.
It's a lot of intense fights where like your life is on the line,
Hmm.
and it's a lot of punchy kill fights, but the punches are very different than a normal punch. They're gonna be bullets or making someone fall or sound based tracking.
Or elevation.
Yeah, well that's making
Yeah.
someone fall.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that's probably what I'd list as the core strength of part five. Um, what brings it kind of down in the tier list for me, which again, I still like part five, but what makes me like it a little bit less than most of the other parts is I just don't feel like we're doing I don't feel like we're progressing anywhere with these characters. Like
Hmm.
pretty much all the characters on paper as they are, like I think they're really
Likeable.
cool. Yeah, like most of these characters I think they're really cool just on a base level. Like even all the enemies we fight, they have like their own distinct personalities and
I feel like sometimes the enemies outclass the main characters a lot of the
yeah.
time.
So man, I like most of the characters, but they just don't really get that development. Like I don't know what's fish hook, what's fishing pole guy.
A
Yeah,
pesky,
yeah,
pesky.
he gets more development
Yeah,
in like half an episode than most of our main characters do.
And while
yeah.
it's forced, it's also kind of well done for how fast it is. Like
Yeah,
it's a fast paced but fun character development.
Hmm.
I think the big clincher for me was that back when I had finished part five, I was like, okay, I wonder if there's like what am I missing here? Like Araki had to be doing something here. And so I was looking at like discussions and stuff, and a lot of people were saying things like, yeah, no, part five gets a bad rap for the storytelling, but I think a lot of it's suffering a lot because what most people have read are the original translations, not like the official ones, like the newer ones that translate a lot better, and you get a better read on the characters
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, well, okay, maybe I wasn't, maybe I was suffering from bad translations. I want to see, kind of what the characters were meant to be. And I looked into it, and it turns out I was reading the new translations that are supposed to be the good ones, and I still didn't really get a lot out of it.
So
Yeah, I think the big thing for me is like compared to like I hate to compare parts because they're so like individual from each other, but if you look at Crusaders, there are really small moments that happen that you get a glimpse into like the people on this road trip really do enjoy each other's company,
yes. Hold
and
on,
they're
Joe. You're stealing a lot of my points here. Let me go. Can I tag in? Because I'm gonna.
yeah
I feel like we're gonna cover a lot of stuff.
yeah
For me, I totally agree with Bradley and Joe, where action is the strong point of Part 5. I want to add an addendum, I suppose, where Part 5 has very good kill your opponent action. It's after, even including Part 3, as when stands have been introduced, it's the one with the least gimmick fights, which I know some people don't like those fights a lot of times. I feel like they're a space where Araki can really flex
creativity.
his creativity. Where how can you make something like a game of rock paper scissors or gambling fun, or like a stand
Video game.
where you're stuck to someone else and the other person is just walking away from you, like even before this, and it gets even crazier and crazier in like 8, like where he's just doing all sorts of like really different kinds of encounters.
Fucking street man with
A
leaves.
fucking Leaf Street, and like 7 and 6 and 4, like they really capitalize on this. Where one of the arcs in 4 is just I found an alien and I'm going to use them to help me gamble, and it's really fun and creative, and it shows you like a really fun dynamic between characters. In Part 5, the only arc that really starts to scratch this is Talking Head and Clash, which I prefer in the manga because there's some things in anime where a screeching boy is better when you're reading him than when you're listening to him. So I really like that arc in the manga. It also doesn't help that that first episode of Talking Head in the anime is like probably the worst animated episode probably in all of JoJo's for me. So much weird shit with that one. But like that's the closest we get where the fight is I can't tell the truth and there's a stealthy water stand attacking. So it's mixing the action cutthroatness of Part 5 with some of the more creative gimmicky stuff in the other parts, and I like the parts that mix that well. So but like if you're coming for JoJo's just for the kill fights, the real like conventional fights, I feel like that like Part 5 is really good for that. It has a lot
There's
of good ones.
punches here and a lot of like deadly kind of gunslinger action, I guess, where you have to be like, I gotta be real careful what I do here right now, or I'm screwed. Like with Buccioli zipping himself into many pieces to hide himself from.
Yeah, a lot of good tension moments for sure, especially in like those 4 or 5 arcs that we keep bringing up. Throwing Metallica in there as well. Aside from like the other 4 that we keep talking about, those are they're some of the best JoJo fights. Where this part really drops for me, it's the characters, which is what I think we've all been kind of building towards this. Where my particular take with the characters is, like Bradley said, they're all pretty fun in a vacuum. They're all pretty interesting in a vacuum. But when you break it down to how do they interact with each other, what do they do in their life, that's where they really fall apart. If you go back to, I think comparing this cast to Part 4 is too unfair because I think Part 4 just stomps it so hard in character dynamics.
That was Part 4's whole thing. It's about being a community of people.
Yeah.
Like,
so that's why I'm not going to compare it to that because I feel like that's an ass stomping. So let's compare it to the Part 3, which to me, in my mind, Part 5 has always been a better Part 3, but that's kind of shifted lately, where I've really grown to appreciate the characters in Part 3 over the characters in Part 5, where the characters in Part 5, maybe you could say they're better written because they have sadder backstories, they have so much more epic, like, tragedies, they're such tragic characters, but in the end of the day, they're just not as fun or entertaining as the Part 3 characters, and even then, they're not as grounded as the Part 3 characters, and that goes a long way. I feel like these guys, like, tell me what Giorno does when he gets back home, aside from doing mafia things and stealing like luggage. Like, what does Mista do on his day off? What does Fugo do when he's not on a mission? We don't really get a glimpse of who they are outside of that. And you might say, well, that their job is being mafias. But then I would retort to that by saying that in every single JoJo part, and I mean like every single other one, the characters are normal people. Even in the weirdest sense, where they're going on a like road trip across America as cowboys, they're so grounded because they have families, they have pasts.
They all have something to go back home to. Like,
they also all have like personalities and likes and relationships with each other. Like, does Mista have any friends or family outside the crew? Does Abakio, aside from that cop that he left behind, what does he have to go back to? What does he even like? Like, I can't definitively answer a lot of these things.
And the thing is too is that that's not a bad thing to have in a story.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to like justify that. Like, there needs to be a moment where like the team sits down and kind of really thinks about like, this is all I have left. Like, this is like kind of like that's what this story needed for that to work.
Mm-hmm.
Is at a point where someone breaks down and it's like, I can't risk losing anybody because this is literally all I have left in the world. Like, that needed to be a big moment for somebody. Maybe Norencia. Like,
yeah, I feel like Norencia kind of gets there too. He's the one that really gets there when he swims after them.
yeah.
But I feel like they did kind of get to that point where like, yeah, clearly they don't have any other lives because this is all they have left. Maybe that's the point. But that's not what I like about JoJo's. You could go to Naruto or Bleach to just get fighty boys, you know, to get action shonen boys, because that's what Part 5's cast ends up being. They're action shonen boys and Trish. While something I've always loved about JoJo's is like, fucking Jonathan is an archaeologist. Joseph is a real estate guy. Josuke probably grows up to be a cop, and he has all his friends. Jolene, Jodo is a fucking marine biologist who also works with the Speedwagon Foundation, and Jolene has her friends in prison who they all rely on each other to have fun while they're there. She has her relationship with Romeo. She has her relationship with her mother, both which are like, they're still alive. They haven't abandoned her. She has her relationship with her dad, which is a huge thing.
They feel like I think JoJo's doesn't have the greatest world building because I don't think that's the point of each part. The point of each part is to tell like, here's a normal situation with bizarre events happening within it.
Part 4 has like pretty fucking good world building, I think.
But that's like
that's contained in Part 4 though. I agree with you in other senses.
Yeah, but like if you're going from part to part, I don't think you can like accurately say like there's a JoJo's universe, and like, because they are really much just like, here's a normal situation, like here's a normal town, here's a woman in prison, here is like a gangster on the street, here is a guy that has a sick mother at home and going on a road trip with his buddies. Like, here's an event that kind of here's a series of events that like lead them during this time of their life, basically. And what makes that better is when you realize that this person has something else in their life that's outside of that, even if you don't ever get to see it. But
for example, like, I'm trying to think with Gyro, right? We don't get to see much of his home life aside from flashbacks, but it's like, oh, he has to finish this mission. It's like, people will miss him if he finishes this mission. Aside from like, the other really spoilery things I won't talk about because we're not doing Part 7. Yeah. But like, Gyro, he has to finish this, and like Johnny, finishing this is his whole goal. Like, it's very important to him, and we know where his life is going to go after. When Giorno becomes the boss, it's like, what does that even mean? What does being the boss even mean in this fictitious, might as well be Naruto Ninja's faction of mafiosos?
That's like the biggest kind of letdown to me, is just how quickly he becomes the boss after the end. You're like, oh, all right, cool. I guess that's how Mafia works, but it doesn't. But
that's how Mafia works, baby.
Yeah.
I think that like covers most of my main points, but there's something I left off for the main negative. I said the character's right. I said that the action is very action oriented, which is good in some senses. But Diavolo. Bradley, why don't you tell us a little bit about Diavolo? I feel like you haven't talked in a while. You got some good things to say about him.
Like, I just don't feel like there's anything there. Like, the problem is the thing I've talked before in other podcast segments about how much I love Kira to no end.
Me
And like,
too.
so I love him, and then without spoiling really anything about the part 6 and 7 villains for people
They're
who wouldn't
phenomenal.
watch those, the non-spoilery thing I do like about them is that the core of like their motivation and the core of like the main conflict is like pretty are like philosophical issues that people have been dealing with for a long time,
And they're
and
interesting, you know, like
you could
interesting goals.
while
And-
while most people don't agree with the villains of those parts, like I think the villains at least have some kind of point. Diavolo, like there's just nothing there for me to grab onto. Like he held his mom underground for all these years, torturing her.
And why? For why? Because he's crazy. That's like what. That's everything about Diavolo is that he's a crazy man.
And it's not even like it's not even like the supremely interesting kind of crazy that Kira is.
Yeah.
Like,
Or the
he's-
fun crazy that Dio is. You know, like
he's-
the
he's
over the
just
top.
fucking insane.
Yeah, and you bring up the mom thing, man. When we were watching that, I was like, God damn it, I forgot about that. That's real shitty.
And it kills the character because the whole thing about that character Diavolo is you don't know anything about him. Like nobody knows anything about him. That's his whole kind of character trait is and it really should have stayed like that. Like it really should have been like he's such a mystery that he really doesn't have a past, and that's kind of it because that's all you need for.
Yeah, maybe that would have been a little better.
Because it's just like because the one thing that makes Diavolo so interesting is Doppio.
Yes.
It's because you realize like this person is so crazy and so obsessed with not being found. He has mentally changed his like he has mentally like fractured himself to hide himself. Like that's fascinating.
Yeah.
And you just need to build off of that.
And
I
it didn't
think-
really, it didn't really build interesting. Like, Doppio's his loyalty to the boss really fascinating. But then there's not much to it, you know. Like, Doppio dies pretty early after he's introduced. I don't know, man. Doppio versus Metallica is really interesting because he's borrowing from the boss. But like, Doppio's the interesting one in the relationship. Diavolo is so boring to me.
Diablo is just like a monster, which is it's okay to write a monster, but what kills the monster is when you try to like to try to fill in that monster gap like without any reason. Diavolo just has no motivation for this entire part, like Bradley said. He wants to
kill Trish so that he can remain like nothing can trace back to him. And like compare that to every other villain, even like the over the top ones. That's such a
even
lame...
Dio.
Yeah.
Like you look at Dio and you can clearly understand like why he wants to kill the Joestar family and take the fortune because he grew up poor. He grew up in this shitty part of town.
Not to mention when Dio is philosophizing with Enya and in like some later parts you get some glimpses of that as well. You can see where like his want to conquer fear is kind of an interesting philosophy. Like I don't fear the JoJos, but I want to make sure that I have the power that I can overcome them so I can rule the world and never fear again. That's pretty cool. Like he's over the top and hammy, but like I can latch on to something like that.
The first big quote from JoJo's that really latched onto me is
Do you believe in gravity?
saying that at the end of the day, the only thing that people really want is peace of mind. And like I don't know, like that was all I needed for Dio to become like a justifiable, or not justify his actions, but like justifiable as a cool villain for me.
Yeah, like on a writing sense, like that's an
Absolutely.
interesting villain to write about.
Yeah.
And like the idea of trying to erase your past is interesting, but like that's just all that there is to him. You know, it's I don't know, man.
There's no why.
Dio has his flamboyance. Dio has like his relationship with the JoJos. All that Diablo has is his relationship with Trish, and somehow taking care of this organization, even though he's a fucking psychopath.
Hmm. It's he just doesn't. He lacks anything that makes him. Uh, he just lacks reason, and it's kind of hard to like suspend disbelief about that when the person that's controlling a vast mafia network is a crazy person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I would have loved to see how he operates and plans. I want to see how he plans like a takeover. Not to mention, we don't really know what this mafia does for work. They don't do drugs, that's for sure, or they do drugs, but that's not okay. So
Hmm.
I don't know what they'll do after. It's whatever. But
Like,
I would have liked to see him managing something uh, from the shadows, from some cryptic phone calls. I want to see him like look at charts and be
and,
like, okay, like my mafia is doing well.
yeah, that's look at you. But and that goes back to what I said about killing potential, because the thing about mafia like stories and mafia movies, it isn't the whole like the fact of like oh, we're going around killing people and then running drugs. It's the fact of the drama and the dynamics of the people in charge, because you're working with a group of bad people, like a bunch of bad people and bad selfish people are working together, so they're each trying to like one up each other and get each other's like back. Like the whole plot at the beginning is Bruno and Giorno are like, okay, we don't like that they are selling drugs in Italy, so the only way we can do that is by getting close enough to the boss, killing him, and being able to convince the rest of the mafia to join our side. Like that's like a perfect drama setup for a mafia film. And then you get halfway and you're just like, oh, I was just going to kill him instead, and then we'll figure it out from there. And you're just like, that kills any kind of interesting part of that dynamic. It
It's
really kills any kind of like what makes the boss so mysterious, of like, oh, like how does he operate, how does he get things done, like how does he get this power and whatnot. But it's just like he's just a man in a tower now that have to go kill, rather than some guy that's organizing and like is so is so smart that he's able to like control all of Italy's crime network basically, or at least a
and
part.
and it's like, yeah, it's just a waste of opportunity. And all the villains that they fight are just assassins thrown at them with the like. I think there's one or two that are like also trying to get the stuff they're getting to.
Yeah, it's Saleh and
Yeah, I think that might be the only one, and then everything else is like an order from either Risotto or the boss,
yeah.
and it's like, so our rise to power is just to kill everyone else. There's no mafia politics or even the remotely like remote interest. And I mean, JoJo isn't always that part of that kind of series up until like maybe part 8 really starts like fleshing out these kinds of ideas. But like up to this point, like yeah, that's not maybe JoJo's isn't the kind of series to really dive into inner gang politics. But I mean, I guess that makes that then that this isn't like a great setting for a JoJo part, because it
Yeah.
also directly feeds into my other problem that I had, where the characters don't feel grounded. They
Hmm.
feel like part of this magical organization of
Yeah.
posing killers.
And I think like a lot of them have good backstories, like Abaccio like being a
Oh
cop, and
yeah,
like that's a great backstory.
Giorno's backstory is it's like really sad.
Yeah, and Narintia like having to like getting beat up and is a stupid fuck,
Yeah,
and
I love him. Love that boy.
it like they all have like very compelling reasons as to why they join the mafia, and that's fine. It's just past that. That's kind of it. Past it, there's no like this part feels like it should have gone on longer to develop these characters more, the dynamic more, or whatever. Like it should have been on the level of part 4 in length, but I think they were just scared to do that long take again.
hmm I
Um,
mean, it would have only been 2 volumes more, but that could have like, if it was the same amount of arcs with more character dynamics and
yeah.
politics, I feel like that could have been more interesting.
Mhm.
The last thing I want to bring up with the character training that we've been going is, I mentioned this before, but like also the inner part relationships are kind of lacking in this one, where all the characters are pretty cool individually, but they're also very similar, where they're all cool, brooding gangster boys, with the exception of Narantia.
I
Um,
think Durant and Missa are the ones that are like the most because they're both very loud and boisterous, while everyone else are like, shut the fuck up.
Mista still kind of shut the fuck up. He falls into the Venn diagram more than I'd like. Where he, especially in the latter half, he's just like the cool guy. He'll point
Well,
out
here's the
the
thing.
he'll point the gun at you and shoot you dead, and he'll keep his cool.
But I think Mista's the more compelling one because like, yeah, he'll do that, but then he also has Sex Pistols that he has to
Right.
deal with.
Oh, I
Yeah.
mean, by no means I'm saying that like he's definitely the best of that, but he's also in the group of only that pretty much. And like everyone's relationship with Bruno is that they look up to Bruno. Bruno takes care of everyone else. Giorno and Bruno are in on it, but then he has no real relationship with anyone else except Abaccio. Where
Yeah.
Abaccio hates him, and that was really good that they have Abaccio hating him.
Yeah.
Fugo kind of looks over Narancia, but then Narancia to everyone else is pretty much the same.
Yeah.
But then you replace that with, like I said, part three, where each character is maybe less individually well written, but as a group, they make a better group. Where if you look at how Jotaro reacts to his grandfather, to Polnareff, to Kakyoin, it's very different than how Joseph reacts to Polnareff and Kakyoin. And Avdol is there, and he's like pretty cool with everyone, so he's a solid rock. But he has a very special relationship with Joseph and Kakyoin, or
Yeah.
rather Polnareff. And then Iggy is also there, and he's like super separate from a lot of people. And his meeting with Jotaro is really fun, and then also like a lot of the other characters, he shits on Polnareff. There's just a lot more webs, and if you jump into part four, like that blows both of them out of the water with like webs, especially the side
Yeah.
characters.
I like that kind of segues into like the last thing that I wanted to say about Par 5. Is that like Jotaro and Giorno both at the beginning of their particular stories have a very kind of similar personality. They're both that like
Stoic,
kind of that stoic, brooding kind of guy.
cool guy,
Um,
cool tactician, smart,
Yeah.
stoic guy.
And just the reason what brings Jotaro over Giorno for me is that is developed upon. At the beginning of Jotaro's story, he's he's still a man like in a teenager's body, but
Yeah.
he's kind of angsty. He's like, fuck off, leave me alone. No one, I'm gonna do my own thing. But by the end of the story, he's gone from that angsty teenager to a man who will put
Yeah.
himself on the line, who's rough but clearly still cares for people.
Not to mention, like, especially with the anime, the last thing he's looking at is the picture of him and his friends, and
Oh man.
he's
Yeah.
sad about it. Like, he's reminiscing about the good times they had together because, hey, these guys had a good time together despite going through hell. They had fun. They were friends, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and part of that too is for Jotaro is that we see where he goes afterwards, and that's a big plus. But yeah, during even that part, like you get to the end, and there's this part where like Dio has killed Joseph, and Jotaro's just like, I know you're telling me to do this, but I can't just
I can't.
I literally can't just let this guy kill you and not get away with it and get away with it. Basically, I have to do something to revenge you or avenge you or whatever. It doesn't matter. Like whereas at the beginning, Jotaro had been like, "Fuck all of you. I don't care who you are. I stop bothering me. I want to be by myself and chill out." But yeah, it's just by the end for Giorno, and like you can have flat characters, but like Giorno,
Hell, I'd say 3, 4, and 5 all have flat characters, but
yeah,
the fact that those flat characters are the rocks of the series where every character bounces off of them and is better for meeting them. It's like I feel like the same with Giorno, but Bruno
Yeah.
also fills that role, and there's just a lot of flatness going on here.
I think one of the best things. So I talk about Mr. King Crimson, and I've always thought there's like two routes that could have gone past that point, which is one, you have Bruno actually die there, like he's dead, and Giorno comes out and he's just like, the boss killed him. Like, here's what we were planning to do, and then Giorno has to step up and take up that leadership role because now like there's a power vacuum, and Giorno has to like prove to everyone else now that he has to be the alpha or the mom or whatever you want to be of the group.
That's immediately more interesting, actually.
Yeah, and like and it gives more like kind of reason, and especially because like you have all these moments like leading up to this point where they're learning to trust Giorno. Like Mista has a fight with with White Album. Abbacchio figures out like he's willing to sacrifice himself to figure out what's going on with Saleh. And maybe and like the only one that's missing, actually thinking about it, Narancia and Giorno don't have a single fight together.
They have clash a little bit. I think
A
that's
little
it.
bit. That happens afterwards.
Yeah.
So it's like really just moving that in front of it and kind of showing that like the characters have like learned to trust Giorno and like have realized now that this person that they've been told is their boss really doesn't care for them. It kind of lets them think about like, what do we do? And really makes that impactful moment of stepping away from the organization and trying to take down the boss a lot better, I think. Um, Alternatively, you double down the Bruno being a zombie thing and do it to everyone else, and then there's some fucked up shit you have to deal with there theming wise, and basically that Giorno is now leading an army of zombies to go kill Diavolo, and like really like, are you doing the will of everyone in your team or the will of everyone of your own will and imposing on everyone else? And goes back to Dio with his own army of zombies kind of thing.
Wow, that that is so much more interesting as well. The idea that Giorno does what's right through a mountain of corpses would be
Yeah.
the perfect showing of I am Jonathan and Dio's spawn.
Yeah.
There were sacrifices that had to be made, but we saved Italy from drugs, I guess.
Drugs bad.
Drugs bad.
That's the point. I think like halfway through, they're like, "Oh man, Bruno's a great character. We shouldn't kill him yet." And I think that hurt the story more for it because it didn't allow
Yeah.
Giorno to be his own unique character. Because it's very much more Bruno's story than Giorno's story, and it's kind of sad when that happens when it's JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Like I understand people like get hung up on like main characters doing all sorts of cool shit, but like they're the main character for a reason. Like I want to follow their story.
Um, we before we wrap this up, we'd be remiss not to cover King Crimson and that final arc because I'm very opinionated on those.
Yeah,
With King Crimson, I think King Crimson's a really cool stand, way cooler than
yeah.
Diavolo is,
Yeah.
but it frustrates me to no end with how inconsistent it is.
Like yeah, and Araki's not very consistent in a lot of things, but like
This
this
one really
one thing in
hurts.
particular is just it. And I think the fact of the matter is there's no clear like explanation of what it actually does, and that's the problem. Because you have people say like, oh, he skips time and he erases everything in between it, and he can't affect anything during that time other than take himself out of that point. It's like, okay, cool, but then how does everything else that he would have happened happen then? So does he adjust fate? Does he just like, what does that mean? Like there's no explanation as to what he can and can't do.
For me, the sticking point is when they say that he can't affect anyone in stop time or skip time, but he becomes stop time in certain scenes, which is the problem, where he kidnaps Trish, he kills Narancia, he moves everything out of a hotel room
Yeah.
while a maid is there, and he kills the fortune teller all in skip time. But hey, he can't affect you in skip time, so we get this bullshit blood trick, even though in the same arc he kills Narancia. It's like the suspension of disbelief and like the patience I have with Araki and his inconsistencies really go out the window when like people try to defend the stand for making sense, and it like straight up it just doesn't, and we kind of have to live with that. And it's like, oh, he was destined to kidnap Trish in the stop time. Well, if he was destined to kidnap Trish in the stop time, then Bruno would have been destined to pull out sticky fingers and attack him. So even though he wouldn't remember that, he would have at least been in position at the end. But that's just not how it works, and just confusing.
It's like, and that would make it even more interesting. Like imagine if like skip time happened and Bruno was just like, why is sticky fingers out? What's happening?
Exactly. That would have made sense. It would have been that easy to like for me to believe it.
The thing is, what makes it good is when you, because there are small moments when they show that happening. Like there's a point where like they show outside like Narancia and Miss Sarah fighting over some chocolates, and skip time happens, and they keep fighting, and they don't realize that Narancia already ate the chocolates because that's what he's supposed to do there. And you're like, oh, okay, I get that, but it doesn't line up with everything else that he can do.
Yeah, because sometimes he just stops time, and that's all it is.
Yeah.
Bradley, you got any King Crimson things?
But how does it work?
Epitaph is cool, at least.
I will say though, I love his design. His design is like so perfectly reflective of who Diavolo is in Doppio with Epitaph and the small head
Yeah,
and everything. It's so creepy looking. I love it. It's one of my favorite like looking stands,
looks very cool.
and I like the ability. It's just I don't think it's presented very well or very
Yeah.
consistently.
Finally, there's all these amazing arcs in part 5, right? Like we've been talking a lot of shit, but like I think Black Sabbath is pretty cool. I think White Album's amazing. It's one of my favorite JoJo arcs. I think Grateful Dead and Green Day are great. I think Metallica's fantastic. Any ones that you guys want to throw out into the positive pile?
White
I think.
Album, top notch.
Would you say, Brad? I'm sorry.
White Album is top notch.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was
boy.
gonna say Clash and Talking Head.
Yeah, of
Like,
course. Very creative.
yeah, manga version is a lot better, I think, after like watching it again because
Hmm.
there's some pacing things that go on with that fight that's really hard to justify when you're in anime space.
It's like the time stops in Dio World and in like Sheer Heart Attack, where it's like these just make sense when people are talking. They make sense in a panel, you know.
Yeah, it makes sense because you have the speed to read through everything, and they're more or less explaining the thought process. They're not actually just sitting there talking. They're more or less talking to you, the reader, than they are talking to the other person.
A lot of fantastic fights. Main crew got a lot of fun stands. That last fight though, that
Yeah,
really that's what really sours the pot for me.
it's
It's bad.
it's a lot of it's everything in the kitchen sink, and it's really unnecessary. I
Yeah,
feel.
because Silver Chariot, like, so we're referring to Silver Chariot Requiem plus
King of Kings.
King of Kings, which Silver Chariot Requiem is just one of the messiest, least interesting arcs. It takes a while for it to get going, so even on a rewatch, it's like, okay, let's get to it because you're just gonna explain a bunch of shit that doesn't make sense, and I already know that. It
Mhm,
gets like 6 components to its ability throughout the arc.
mhm.
It over necessarily complicated and bloated. It
It has a weakness that they act like is foreshadowed, but really isn't.
it's the most frustrating thing. I'm just gonna break the light in the back of my soul. It's been there all along.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Jesus. Very frustrating. The actual action has some lulls where it's like they're just kind of walking and looking at it.
Mhm.
Um,
Remember when everything started to mutate? Because I forget that every time.
nope, I really wish I could forget it, but it's one of those 6 components I don't like. Polnareff gets the real short end of the stick where our sweet boy's in a fucking turtle just
I
because
love
shit's.
I love New Turtle Boy.
Ugh. And then, like, I really like near the end, after the bullshit with destroying your own soul happens. First of all, the soul mechanics also, like, no, like, souls and fates are a big part of like, a big part of JoJo. Like, every part in JoJo's has, like, some soul component, and especially some fate component. And, like, this is the part where fate is linked into the heaviest.
Hmm.
It's not done particularly interesting in my opinion, but that's probably the main theme of part 5. But like they really go overboard with it here, where like all of a sudden your souls have like all these mechanics where they have to switch bodies and they go back into their original bodies if your body is freed up of a soul, and someone with a split personality now has 2 souls, and like you just have to keep going with it. And there's of course like your soul is now sped up, so your stand is sped up, which is also another component of the stand. Oh, I not a fan. But after the bullshit happens, you get a really sick sequence of Diavolo running towards the arrow, and like
Yeah,
he lets Mista shoot at him because he knows like a stop sign's gonna get in the way. It's like, oh, this is like prime King Crimson being used.
yeah. This is like how King Crimson should be used. Essentially, he's using the ability to skip time to.
And see through the future and move stealthily and efficiently.
Like I think a big part was that um Araki wanted to make an aggressive and like very monstrous stand, but create one that's more orientated to confusion, disorientation, and kind of like making your opponent question what's happening and confusing the shit out of them so he gets into a position to kill him. But a lot of times it just feels like he's just able to like one shot people constantly. It just feels dumb. But yeah, that the last bit of that fight's really awesome, even including like it's just because they're running around and they have to like they're all in different bodies, so they all have to like keep track of who's who, and then the best payoff in that all of that is Bruno breaking the orb behind his head, which is still dumb,
But like,
but
let's go with it. You know, let's give it
yeah, I'll go
benefit.
with it. it allows it comes to a good conclusion where Bruno's like, I have to just let go and let everyone take care of this situation. I can't do it anymore. Like that's his conclusion of the arc, is allowing to move on and let his family, quote unquote, take care of itself.
Yeah.
And he breaks the orb, and like everyone switches, which saves everybody and allows Jorno to get the arrow to beat King Crimson. And
Which
it's
how y'all feel about Gold Experience Requiem?
Fuck it.
Yeah, Bradley, not a fan.
Not a particularly huge fan.
You wanna tell the people why?
Like, uh, I mean, it's not the fact that it's overpowered. I don't really care if it's overpowered. Much like all the other stuff I don't like in Golden Wind, I just don't feel like thematically it was putting attack in anything.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't. It feels like a cop out. That's the problem, and it feels like there wasn't. And like when Requiem comes out, the fight's over immediately.
Yeah,
Like it's basically just like,
ass beating.
yeah, like it's a straight up counter to anything and everything in the JoJo universe, and it's just basically like, we're ending the part now. That's it. We're done. That's basically what it is.
Well, Joe, you've clearly forgot about the world over heaven, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah,
That's
but
not canon.
that's not canon. So who cares?
Yeah, I don't mind Gold Experience Requiem. I think it's cool. I,
Yeah,
I don't mind when stuff evolves, especially when it is heavily foreshadowed with the arrow. I just think it's like, yeah, he got a power up to win. I would have preferred if he had to like. I don't like when Jotaro does it. I'll go back to that. But like I thought that was a little cooler because it wasn't one sided. It was like at least balancing out the fight.
And part of it was you kind of can say like, Jotaro realizes that he could potentially do this. He just has to figure out how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And
here it's just like Jotaro gets it and he auto wins. And
yeah, and the stance just like, oh, my user doesn't even know how to use me, so I'll do it for him. So fuck you. He literally says that.
the ability is fuck you. The ability.
Yeah.
Then Diavolo gets like the most brutal death. I don't know if it was worth it.
The thing is, and it's also really confusing, but I think honestly that sequence would have been better if it was just like, oh, he's essentially alive in his body, but his body's not alive, so he's conscious for the entire rest of his death and existence, kind of like Cars is, you know?
Yeah, it's more complicated though, because it's like, where did his body go? Is it just in the river now? It's hard to say.
Well, it obviously gets picked up because they go through and like, it's like, oh, he got stabbed by the homeless man, and then it gets to the morgue, and then it does all this stuff. It's just like, the Rax is like, oh, by the way, then he's in the street, and then it gets really confusing after that. It's good up until that point. You're like, okay, this doesn't make sense now. But yeah.
Well, that's we went there, but I feel like because this is a pretty well liked part, and we're just coming off the anime hype, I feel like we really had to make our stances clear here.
Yeah,
I think we did a decent job at that.
Yeah, I mean, part 5 is great. I mean, I love watching part 5. It was tons of fun.
Oh, it's a blast. It's just it has my most gripes out of all the parts.
Yeah, I agree. And I think part 8's a better part 5, and what I wanted from this part.
Yeah.
Because part 8's fucking the bomb.
It's the bomb. It's the bubble.
Yeah.
All right, let's do our original rank this part in comparison to the parts we've covered.
Oh, okay.
This one might be a little hard. So we've done 1, 2, 7, 5. So what do we got?
So let's toss out 7 because it doesn't really matter because it's in space ahead of everything.
7 is still untouched right now, as far as we've covered.
I think mine is 2, 5, 1. I think 1 still, the big thing about it, 1 is the pacing problems and just kind of how.
Do you mean backwards? 2, 5, 1?
That's why I said 2, 5.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. Like it's just to me a big thing about everything I read or do is the pacing. If the pacing is off for something, I'm not gonna like it because I feel like I'm wasting time. But part 5 has great pace coming down to it. Like it feels like you're going and you're going and you're going and you're going and you're having a great time along the way. It just doesn't feel. It's like a junk food part where you're just
whole adventure takes place in 4 days, by the way.
Yeah. I still enjoy it. I think the fights are better in this part than anything. But like part 2, man, has such better character dynamics between Caesar and Joseph and Lisa and everything.
It's less characters, but I feel like they make it count. What you got, Bradley?
I was also going to go for 2, 5, 1. And the only reason I put one below 5 is just honestly probably because there isn't more of one. Like
Yeah,
man, I still like part 5, but I feel like character wise, even parts 1 and 2 outclass it.
it's really tough for me because so 7, of course, is in the stratosphere, and I'm gonna put 1 at the bottom. But between 5 and 2, I just when it comes to the combat, I prefer stands at the end of the day than anything Hamon related. So
I
even though part 2 is like a better consistent part 5 has more highs for me. So I'm gonna edge it out. I'm gonna put it
okay.
above 5 for now.
That's
It could change.
Yeah.
Or sorry, I'm gonna put 5 above 2 for now. That's what we're
Yeah.
going with. Villain wise, if we want to do that, it
Yeah.
definitely goes backwards order. It goes 7, 1, 2, 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I have to agree with you, which is really sad because I don't think Cars is that interesting as well.
He's not, but at least
Actually, you
like
know what? I'm gonna put Diavolo Doppio above Cars just because of Doppio. Like that's the only reason I think it's above it.
man, that scene where Cars becomes the ultimate life form is just so much more fulfilling as a
Wait,
reader.
but he never became Shadow the Hedgehog.
He didn't, but he could have transformed. It was like if the fight went on for like another 2 chapters, we would have seen it.
You're right, the real Ultimate Life Form.
The real ultimate life form.
Rock Boy. And his
All
third
right.
points, parts.
All right, gang, let's fucking stop talking about this awesome part.
Yeah.
My head fucking hurts.
Are we-
Hi, everybody.
Welcome to our fairly regular podcast section called "Take That, You Worm."
Yeah, that's what we're calling it now.
That's what it is. I forgot about that, and someone commented that on our video. I was like, of course,
Yeah, we'll go
that
with
should be
that.
it. Sometimes Joe hasn't ever read Worm or anything, but he'll sometimes post us like a spoiler message, and we click on it, and it says "Take that, you worm," and we're like, "Oh,
It's
you fucking
it's
got
the
us."
go-to.
It's
The go-to meme.
pretty good. That and
It worked.
discombobulate is also up there.
Discombobulate.
Woo. Okay. We're gonna talk about Worm. This shouldn't go too long because these chapters are actually pretty quick. I did 11.c and 11.d actually right before we started.
Yeah, I scrolled through them and they were substantially shorter than like 11.a is.
Because thank God, I like my chapters nice and short.
Quickie.
First chapter, we got Fault Line Crew being chased by a hero, or villain rather, called Burn Scar.
Oh yeah, Burn Scar the hero.
The big hero Burn Scar.
Big hero Burn Scar.
She was introduced in the other chapter, right? Because I don't remember her name. Like, I remember some of the other names, but it's like, oh, Burn Scar.
Yeah, well, because there was like that time when they were looking through the files at Coil's base, I think.
Yeah, and they went over all of them, basically.
Yeah, I don't know if she was in there. She might have been, but even if she was, they gave very sparse information on all of them anyway.
So
But I think the name Burn Scar tells you all you really need to know.
her name, her ability lets her teleport through fire that she makes. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That is rad because they don't really explicitly say it, but it's like she's darting through the fire. It's like, oh, that's what she's doing. That's really cool.
Yeah, and she kind of becomes I guess I don't know how else I'd say it, a hyper carry, like
Yes.
in the late game.
In the late game, she scales really well.
Because the more fire there is, the harder she is to kill, and she'll make more fire, and then she gets harder to kill.
I'll touch on that in a little bit because it's really thematically cool. And I was reading this and I was like, oh man, I could feel the Bradley boner as I was reading it.
Oh, you already know.
Oh, I already know.
Oh, yeah.
So we get a really colorful look into Elle's power, which Elle is Labyrinth, right?
Correct.
Okay, and she's tired now because she just did the thing with the merchants. So what she's doing is she takes locations in the world and recreates them in her current location. Is that the right read?
That's. Yeah, I guess you could go with that.
Then what can I really go with?
In the most non-spoiler way, like, I want to try to be non-spoilery because this power does get expanded upon more as the story goes on.
A goddamn second.
She
She said she was reaching into alternate worlds, and then I remember that like it was somehow established that we're like on a secondary Earth in this story, which is just a background element.
Yeah, which was interesting because this might be the second time the story actually even talks about alternate worlds. I think the
Yeah.
only other time is when Taylor's like, "Oh, we're watching the Star Wars from the other Earth," and you're like, "Oh, of course that's a thing."
I mean, I glossed right over that until you pointed out to me. I was like, wait, what?
But yeah, I think that's what Elle's talking about here. She's kind of like looking into these other worlds that it I guess she has like this kind of influence on them because she talks about building them, but she's definitely pulling these things from somewhere.
Yeah, interesting. I want to see more.
Yeah.
We learn a little bit more about Shamrock. I don't know if we've seen much of her do anything,
I think
but
this might be the first time we have seen her do anything.
so from the explanation, she can use a mix of telekinesis and clairvoyance to kind of just like manipulate stuff into lucky positions, basically.
Yeah, and I think it's like
I like that.
I think what it is like people perceive her power as her being lucky, but I guess at the end of the day it really is just like extremely minor telekinesis.
She's like nudging things into good spots where she
Yeah.
nudges a big ball to break through the big statue that's holding water. Interesting too. I thought Labyrinth could only create like stone structures, but she's straight up pulling water from this other world.
Yeah, the at least in universe, the PRT ranks her as a Shaker 12, which 12 is like the oh my fucking god. Like
It's
yeah.
it's all the way past 11 and 10, so
Yeah, it's a number.
it's a big number.
It's a big old number.
We get so there's a cool device in this whole arc where Elle can't move from her location because I guess she loses like a some sort of bearing that she needs in order to create stuff in that location.
Yeah, like I think she has to kind of have time to set this stuff up. But
Yeah,
like not only physically she has to have time to set it up,
mentally
her
as
power is
well.
also affected by mentally how she's feeling, like how lucid she is that day.
Yeah, because at the end of this story or at the end of this chapter, she's all like, "Man, I'm gonna have to work hard to get back to the mind state I was at the beginning." And the reason is because she knows Burn Scar from some past event, which I don't think is really elaborated on, but they
Yeah,
seem,
it seems like some kind of like asylum, I think.
yeah, they said that the walls had cloth with shit and blood. So I was like, oh, that is immediately unpleasant. Um, super not into it. Uh, and she slowly starts warping her room to look like that because she can't control it even. It's just kind of happening subconsciously.
Yeah, like I imagine when she's seeing this horrible person who is also in that place, there's probably nothing else she can think about.
The last thing I want to talk about this arc is how cool Burn Scar's ability is to where it's kind of symbolic of her entire life to where when she starts fighting she can't control herself and she makes more fire which makes it harder for her to control herself, so she snowballs. She's kind of like Lung, but I think with less control in that sense. Is
Yeah.
that fair to say?
Yeah. And like the reason it's so interesting to me is because the one thing that this has that like lungs doesn't have is that it affects her emotions and
Yeah,
her ability to like empathize because the first like whenever she's in her base state, she's I think she said she clearly actually feels bad about the stuff she's done.
yeah,
As there's more fire around her, she loses the ability to empathize, and it's kind of like a high. And
yeah.
her power seems like a drug to me, where she feels horrible about the stuff she did while she was using her power, so she retreats into using her power so she doesn't feel bad anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly what Elle says about it. It's like I judge you because I know that you're using your power as a mask, as like a escape. I think the most interesting part about that power is how it relates to her entire life trajectory, where the way she explains it, it's like I can't escape now because I escaped and I got in with the slaughterhouse, but now the slaughterhouse won't let me escape, so I have to do what they do, which means I create more fire, which means I hurt more people. It seems like her life is a wildfire that she can't contain, and
Ooh,
that's really reflected in her ability.
good metaphor.
Oh, I really like that. That's one of those things that you always talk about um, with a power relationship back and forth. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think it's especially fitting that she visited Labyrinth in this chapter because they kind of have opposite views of their powers. Both of their powers like influence how grounded they are in reality. It like both of their powers influence their emotional states, but the key difference is that Burnscar retreats into her power's mental state to escape feeling bad. She doesn't want to be grounded in reality. But Labyrinth says the days when she's lucid, when her power's weaker, she calls those the good days.
That is interesting. That's another good one.
So they're kind of a flip-flop of each other, which is interesting.
Good writing, dare I say. Moving on to 11.d, interlude D. There's a lot of interludes. I'm probably gonna finish this arc by like end of year, maybe.
Yeah,
I'll finish.
shit.
So we got Colin / Armmaster just immediately getting attacked by Mannequin.
Yeah, we jump right into it.
I am super down for jumping right into things, especially with characters that we've seen before. I've always said that I kind of like Armmaster. He's an asshole, but like, I don't know, his personality stands out to me, and I feel like we really see some of that this chapter.
Yeah, and man, like right off the bat, the opening to this chapter is something I can just visualize really well.
Yep, I was thinking this is another good one to adapt into
the Netflix series.
Our Netflix series that starts with "Take That, You Worm." That's like that's the opening lyrics of the theme song. Even
you know what? Let's also just make it the title of the show.
Okay, yeah, all right. Mannequin just pops out of the vents, and he's like a bunch of segmented biomes, which is fitting because that's what his tinker power was, connected by chains and like goop. Is that correct?
Yeah, and obviously
that's quite the visual.
Yeah, and obviously we're just now meeting all of these Slaughterhouse-9 characters. I'm sure that we'll get to learn all about their interesting little details later.
Yeah, he's the one we know the least about right now. He's very silent. It's very tense because he's just kind of doing weird robot shit. And Armmaster is just trying to think about what to do and just being in his mind and how serious the situation clearly is. You're like, oh, this is pretty serious, and he might just die here. That death is pretty rare, I'd say, in Worm. Maybe it doesn't get like that later on.
But yeah, I think it's fair to say up to this point, death isn't really just dealt out all the time.
And I was like, maybe this is the point where Mannequin is supposedly here for Armmaster. I got the inkling that maybe he's not. Well, I don't know. Like, he spoke to him like he is, but that just felt weird. I felt like he would have been here for Dragon instead. But then you'd have to explain, oh, how does he know Armmaster has a relationship with Dragon? And then the answer to that would be like, oh, they hacked her better than she can hack herself, which wouldn't be satisfying. So, you know what? I hope it is Armmaster in the end of the day. I hope they're here for him. I like how fucking badass he is at like yelling at Mannequin and trying to get a rise out of him, so he could just maybe get a knife stab in, so he can contaminate his insides.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird because like they briefly talk about how he had his family and they died, and like Armsmaster goes off on him, and he's like, oh, you couldn't cut it when your family died, boo hoo, and like I was like, Jesus, like. Don't be so mean to him.
Right, Armmaster was like, I wasn't dumb enough to have human connections, basically. It's like, oh, this is the kind of guy we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, and I'm kind of reminded that, Armsmaster is kind of a dick sometimes, but he's also yelling at, like, one of the 9 biggest dicks on the planet, so.
Pretty cool. He's almost died, he gets toyed with, glad he lived. I want to see more of him. And the last note I wrote is, a work drops too many F-bombs when the AI is dropping F-bombs. And I was like, oh man, Wildbow really likes fuck. Big fan.
Yeah, I mean, Wildbow's known for fucking, right? So.
Of course.
I think the one thing, not the one thing, well, one particular thing I do really like about the end of this chapter, whenever Dragon screams out the "I need you" when she thinks Armsmaster's gonna die. I kind of thought back to whenever we talked about the Dragon interlude,
right?
Because she clearly considers Colin a friend. She clearly cares about him, but there's also kind of that ulterior motive of she's like, maybe I can get him to
Undo my
do
programming.
modifications on me that I can't
Yeah.
myself. And I think you were even kind of talking about like, oh man, like I wonder if that's going to go that direction where she might kind of lure him in
Yeah,
with
I had a
these
very
feelings.
strong feeling that the story would go in that kind of direction.
Because like she knows that he has a crush on her, so she could lure him in with those feelings. And whenever I initially read this and she screamed out that I need you, my first instinct was, oh, like clearly she's in grief, like he's about to die. But when we're thinking about that ulterior motive, you also kind of think like, okay, well, why is she really screaming I need you?
I felt like it was a bit of both, but I felt it was more for that ulterior motive. That was my read.
Yeah. So I guess we'll just have to we'll keep going. I'm sure this relationship will develop further.
That's all I got. You got anything else, Bradley?
Not a ton. Like these were two pretty short, sweet chapters. I think it was interesting. I think these are just fun interludes because it's interesting to see these new villains we're going to be dealing with.
I liked them. They were good.
Out of the four we've seen so far, um, I like all the members of the Slaughterhouse Nine we've seen so far. For this week, of the two chapters we talked about this week, I liked Burn Scars a lot because she is kind of a different situation than the others. Obviously,
Yeah,
she's
yeah.
still mass murderer, but she also doesn't revel in it like the others seem to. I'm kind of screwed because it's either leave and the Slaughterhouse Nine get me, or stay and everyone else tries to kill me.
Exactly. I like Mannequin too. Just the way he communicates, I thought was interesting. Where he's dropping like little keyboard keys, toying with Armmaster, holding a mirror to his face to say that you're not that different from me. Stuff like that, I thought was pretty
Yeah,
neat.
I think Mannequin's Interlude is definitely one of the chapters we've seen so far that I would most like to see in our Netflix series.
Right, we're in talks with Wild Bow. We're trying to
Yeah.
get the screenplay going. You know how it is.
So many tropes in this chapter that come from horror. Like right off the bat, there's like the tapping sound, and there's something in the vent,
Yeah.
and he's
The
like,
the twitching body. You know.
yeah, it's very, very scary.
I This one would be super cool to be directed in like a very horror leaning fashion. Same with the Jack Slash one,
Oh man,
where like it's a suspense one.
give it to
Um,
me.
yeah, please. I really like all four of the guys we've met so far.
So yeah, we have a few more to meet. Well, I guess there's eight
Five.
members of
Or I
there's
guess
eight members of the nine right
yeah,
now
there's
because
four more then.
yeah, I was about to say five, and I was like, you know what? They're here recruiting the ninth.
Right. Which in C, I mean, Burn Scar might have been there to recruit Labyrinth, but that wasn't made clear, and I don't know if she would want to. So
Oh yeah. So
Interesting.
looking back, I think what it really was is that Burnscar kind of doesn't have anybody in her life right now because everyone in the world either wants her dead or is
We'll
the
kill her.
Slaughterhouse Nine.
Yeah.
So she kind of went to L. I think she was like thinking because we were both in the asylum, we kind of have something in common. We're kind of friends, and I think like this was her opportunity to at least talk to someone. But then she gets there and finds out that Elle never really considered her a friend, and she's
That's
like, "Oh my
rough.
god." So, that means our recruits right now are
Bitch.
bitch. Oni Lee was going to be a recruit,
But he got
but
ganked.
he got ganked. Um, Theo, well, no, he's not a
No,
recruit.
Theo is a future rival / crazy man.
Crazy
We'll
man.
see how that goes.
And then Armsmaster is a recruit.
So I guess
And
we only have 2 out of the 4. Like,
yeah, and I think Jack even said that, or no, I think it was Siberian who said that they can recruit people. I don't think they all have to recruit people.
right. Well,
But
there we go.
we'll see where this develops.
I hope you guys enjoy taking that worm.
Take that, you.
So, me and Joe, on separate occasions, but we both did this
With different people.
with different people. I mean, separate occasions. But we watched a movie called Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino's ninth movie. As you guys know, I've been kind of going back and watching some of them without the time to watch all of them. I'll have to do that after this, but I'm a fan.
Well, they're a big cutie boy.
Yeah, I like Cutie. Um, and Joe is kind of
I like movies. Like I told you this before. Like I like Quentin Tarantino movies. I just there are moments where like I just kind of like I get into like I keep watching them and then I just kind of pass out because
they're
just
long. They're
they're
long and talkative.
yeah.
And Joe's a pacing boy, like you said earlier in the
Yeah.
podcast.
That being said, I didn't feel drowsy during this entire movie. I don't know why.
That's a new fucking record, guys. We did it.
Yeah, which is crazy because this movie is long as fuck.
Oh, it is. It is like 2 hours 40, almost 3,
Yeah.
and it moves at a pretty slow pace, but also like at a good pace where each individual scene, none of the conversations are that long. Like
Yeah.
nothing is like drawn out in particular long in each scene. There's just a lot going on in each scene.
Each scene itself feels like its own miniature movie or scene, or
Well,
it feels like each scene has its own beginning, middle, and end, or point of the story, if that makes sense. Like the part with Cliff and what he's doing, and Rick and what he's doing on set of the new Western show that's being made, and then Sharon Tate and what she's doing. They feel like separate movies going on at the same time.
yeah.
But
With Cliff and Rick, I feel like they're more the same movie. Like that could be a movie of its own, and then you
Yeah.
have the Sharon Tate stuff added.
Which
But
is- yeah.
people, I've seen the criticism that people are like, "Oh, you could remove all of that Sharon Tate stuff," and I'm gonna get to it with very detailed spoilers later. But you really can't. I feel like it was really important to have the Sharon Tate stuff, especially considering what kind of story Quentin Tarantino wanted to tell here and what
Yeah.
his goal was.
I agree, but I also think that it could have been done a little bit more involved with everything else. But I agree that needs to be in there. But
I'll tell you why it worked.
No, I also understand why it works, and I agree as like, okay, I get where he was going with that, but I can understand from like walking in from a movie like a generic movie perspective, being like, why are we just following this? Why are you finding Margot Robbie around just everywhere for no reason? It seems.
Well,
Yeah.
I can tell
reason.
there's good reasons why it's isolated, and it really only all comes together at the very end of this movie. This is a very end-focused movie.
Yeah, it's a western. That's what it is. That's what all westerns are basically. They're movies that are building up to a certain point.
I mean, that's kind of generic. Like,
That was the biggest statement I've ever heard.
I know. It is, but like the big payoff in this is the big showdown.
I just want to say that like Bradley's head is like dying, so he's like, we're like, yo, you can sit out, but he just had to jump in to say that.
I had to get in there.
So like I said, this movie really benefits the very last frame of this movie recontextualizes the whole movie for me. But and it elevated it. But going through it, I was already having fun because what the movie does really well, it's two core characters, which I would say are Cliff and Rick. What they go through and their dialogue and all the filming that goes around them. I mean, like the way that the story is told around them with Quentin Tarantino's direction and dialogue. It's all just really entertaining, fun, and thought-provoking.
Yeah, I feel like a big portion of this is like a kind of a big like theme of these characters and like purpose of these characters is to show like it is the perception of success in real life.
Yeah.
And like that means to one person what it means to another person, because Cliff and Rick have very two different perspectives of that.
But also that's another place where Sharon comes in as well. But
Yeah.
onto the Rick and Cliff, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about our characters a little bit, like the base knowledge that you'd have to know coming in there. Rick is played by Leonardo DiCaprio, the God. Especially like goddamn some of his scenes in this movie. But
Yeah.
Cliff is a aging Western star who is fading out of existence, and the movie opens up with a scene of a director telling him, oh, you know what? I really liked your work on this TV show where you were like a really important part of it. You acted your ass off. You were the classical movie star for this kind of show.
Hmm.
But I've been noticing lately, you just go on TV shows or small movies, and you
Yeah.
just get your ass beat as the villain, and you're just there to make the new younger buck look better.
Yeah.
Why don't you come work with me in Italy, where we can revitalize your career?
Hmm.
Which is apparently something that also happened to Clint Eastwood, where in like the fading years of his career, he went to Europe and then he came back and he got bigger roles after. So like what this movie director is saying has some precedence. He knows what he's talking about. He's actually like that's a helpful dude. Like he's just telling you the truth.
Yeah, and he a big theme in this movie is self-esteem and your perspective
Oh
on your
yeah,
worth. And I think this character is the person that comes to right at the very beginning. He's like, you're worth something, and there's something in you that's really special, but you're not bringing that out in what you're taking. That's like,
something I really love directly after that scene goes with the self esteem thing,
Yeah.
where he's just immediately crying to his friend Cliff. He's like, he's right, I'm nothing. Like I'm fading away. I'm just gonna fucking do nothing. And Cliff is all
Yeah.
like, don't cry in front of the Mexicans now. It's just like,
No.
um,
and that's like almost the opposite of what that guy was trying to do. He was trying to say like you're really good. It's just you're just choosing not to capitalize on it, or you're not realizing another avenue to
but
accelerate that.
and right, and the big part of Cliff is like he's at a stage in life where he just has no self esteem, where he has no confidence.
Yeah, and
Um,
and Cliff is a big character flaw for him. Is he only sees one avenue of success and one way to be, and what one way of like what success is, and that's kind of what Sharon Tate and her family and her relationship is, and how that is to him.
So talking about where Cliff starts at the beginning of the movie, Cliff is
Mhm.
played by Brad Pitt, who give him a fucking Oscar for this one because he killed it.
Did I say Cliff? I have to say Rick, but yeah,
Yeah,
Cliff is great.
you said Rick. Yeah, but talking about Cliff now. Um, so he has always worked closely with Rick, which is Leo's character. They're
He's
very
a-
close friends, and he was his body double in a lot of shows. So they've kept a good relationship of getting where Rick gets the role, and then he gets Cliff to be his body double.
And then like Cliff also does all the side stuff that he's basically like um Rick's chauffeur and kind of like best man in terms of everything else. Like he's like, hey, can you help me around the house? Can you fix my antenna? Can you drive me to this place? And I'll pay you for it. Like Rick is very much just like, I know you're my friend, but I'm not gonna just like not pay you for these things.
Yeah,
Um,
like Rick is also his boss. It's his boss friend, and the reason why is because just like Rick is a fading movie star, Cliff is an even harder fading stunt double because of things he's done in the past and relationships that he's broken. It's really hard for him to get a job in the industry, even with Rick's sway, which isn't that much these days.
Yeah, and the biggest foil for them is that Rick is preoccupied with the idea of like, I'm losing, I'm fading away from Hollywood, I'm losing my time, my life. Whereas Cliff is kind of almost accepted that and really doesn't care. Like he's very humble about his surroundings.
He's super humble. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
there's another argument made against this movie where it's like, oh man, there's a lot of driving scenes with Cliff, right?
Right.
That first one in particular, I feel like was so important for me to understand the character.
Yeah, because especially because you immediately compare the two driving sequences between Leonardo DiCaprio's car and his car, because when he's driving Leo's car or Rick's car, he's very steady, he's very easygoing, he's very careful in what he does.
Hmm.
He's like, this is your car, I'm driving you to place, and this is where you go. As soon as he gets into his car, which is a beat up
Piece of
old
shit.
piece of shit, he fucking blazes out of there like
He-
a bat out of hell.
And then you get these shots of the Hollywood like skyline and the streets to really build the aesthetic because Hollywood as a character is
Yeah.
really important to this movie. It's important that we set the snap frame of what Hollywood was like in 1969, right? But on top of that, the scene is dragged out to a point where it's like he's blazing home and it still takes him a while to get home. And when he gets home to a shitty trailer where all he has is like his cute dog who's a huge hero. Very good boy. I mean girl.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show you the distance he's willing to go every single day to pick up Rick at 7:30 a.m. in the morning, do his chores for him while he's at the studio, try to get stunt job work, which he can't these days,
Yeah.
and just do all sorts of things. And
And it's a long distance too because he starts off and the sun is like not setting, but it's getting close to that setting point.
yeah,
And by the time he gets home, it's dark.
yeah, it was a really smart way, which a lot of people won't appreciate, but it was a really smart way to just show you his dedication to Rick.
Yeah.
And the movie is just full of that. There's so many little details. Like, you look around Rick's apartment, it feels so lived in. You have so much memorabilia about his movies that shows the narcissistic side of Rick, where he's
But
so
also
proud of
his
his
own-
accomplishments.
Yeah, but also his like own pride that he felt proud as an actor or
Yeah.
doing this job and doing these things. It's just like he doesn't want to give that up because that's what makes him feel like a person. Like that's his whole existence.
Even
is
his
being-
parking spot has one of his posters. It's like
Yeah.
he looks at it every day in the morning as they're driving out, and the camera is positioned behind the car, so as they're pulling in and out, you see that poster as well as like a reminder of his past success.
Yeah, to Rick, like his whole identity is his ability and his career as an actor, and he's trying to hold on to that as much as he can, and he doesn't want to devalue that at all. That's his whole big conflict at the beginning with the going to do the Italian movies. Is like it's not real Hollywood, but he just kind of has to come to the grip of like what he actually is.
Yeah. And on Cliff's side, once you get to his house, it is also so lived in, where it's just very functional, very messy. You can tell just looking at his pantry, he cares more about his dog than he cares about himself. It just very good, just filmmaking that tells you a lot about the characters just from the way stuff is shot, the way from the environment. For an example, with the way stuff is shot, there's a scene at a ranch midway through the movie where as he's talking to a certain character, the camera's getting at more crazy Dutch angles and really close up to everyone's face to show you like this very close face-to-face confrontation. Just on a technical level, there is no doubt that this is an S-tier movie for me.
Yeah, it's everything is framed purposely and perfectly. It's amazing.
What other spoiler-free things could I say here?
I think so. Talking about the Sharon Tate thing, it becomes more in the. There's a lot of tension in this movie.
Yes, this is a really big tension-building movie.
And you really only get that if you know a little bit about the
history.
So like this.
I told everyone here to research a little bit about the Manson murders, which is something that is going on in the background of this era in this movie.
And you get these really creepy and like horror paranoia shots. Like there's the scene of like the hippie girls and they're singing and they're coming over you can't like this hill or something there, and there's the light that's behind them and you can't really tell who they are. And
that scene is so good. To introduce the hippies, because it's also the song that they're singing is a Charles Manson song.
Yeah, there's the scene where they're digging around in the trash and they're just finding bread or whatever, and they're just like they're almost like rats.
And they're all over town because they're always in those shots where Cliff is driving. They're in the background showing their presence there. And Sharon Tate even randomly just picks one of them up as just like a little character building moment for her.
And like, I think the best way to describe them is like they're like the rats of Hollywood. They're just kind of like feeding off the scraps of like the starlight and everything, but also resenting them at the same time.
A big part of this movie is also the hippie movement kind of starting to ruin Hollywood, Hollywood's identity. That's really, really internalized in the midway point where Rick is doing his big new movie, and he has to dress like a freaking crazy hippie cowboy kind of thing. There, he's like, how do they even recognize that this is me? And they're like, oh no, we don't want you to recognize this as you. We want them to see your character. And Rick just looks at that as a defeat. It's like, oh, am I really not going to be able to be the star?
But that also leads to a really good moment later in the.
Oh boy, it does. I just want to say, I guess as the last thoughts, this movie, it has probably my favorite movie ending period. The way that this wrapped up was so impactful for me.
Very beautiful.
It was really. I don't want to say too much about it, but it was fantastic. If the movie like seems like it's not going anywhere or you're not sure about it, make sure to keep an open mind and get to the end, because it will make you see things differently, and it will make you every time you think about the movie, it honestly gets better. At least for me.
I think it's definitely one that you want to watch again, because I feel
Boy,
like
do I.
it's shorter once you know like where it's going to, kind of deal, and you're not just like where are we heading to.
And there was a scene in this movie that had me with my eyes watering, almost crying, which I've never cried in the theater. It was just the state at which I am in life in comparison to what the characters were going through in that scene. That fucking broke me, man. And I don't want to. I'll go into it in the spoiler section, but just to get that out there.
Yeah. Anyways, I'm giving it a 5 out of 5. I don't think I'll put in like my top 5 movies. It probably is like top 15 if anything for my personal reasons. But it's a fantastically shot movie, fantastically written, fantastically acted, like S tier.
Holy crap! Really well acted. I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 5, and I think it does break my top 5. I think it beats out Kill Bill as my third favorite Tarantino movie.
Wow, that's some big shit.
Right now it goes 2 movies we haven't talked about on this podcast, and then this movie, and then Kill Bill. And then like Hateful Eight and Jackie Brown. Well, I haven't talked about Hateful Eight yet, but okay. That's where we're standing. That's a big deal for me because all of those movies are like in my top 5 to 10. Like I really like Tarantino's work.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bradley, if any of this sounded cool, I will fucking go. I'll pay for you to go watch it just so I can watch it again.
One thing I like about Tarantino movies is that they always just have good colors.
Oh, this movie's super colorful.
I feel like this movie is more light orientated than color orientated. Do you know what I'm saying? There's a lot of like use of rays and sun rays and the way light refracts in this movie.
Yeah, I could see that. Am I right, ladies? All right, I think we can kick Bradley out now. Brad, you got a hypothetical for us so you can go get some rest.
Okay. So you go to the doctor, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, look, I know I was supposed to be giving you a prostate exam. Long story short, your nose is gone.
What?
So, your nose is gone. Let's not get into it. So he's like, here's the thing. We weren't able to get your nose on ice, even though there's ice everywhere. But I have my leftover lunch from the hospital cafeteria. So yeah, let's pick you a new nose. I have an apple. That could be a good nose. I have a like one of those little pint-sized milk cartons.
Ooh.
I have a banana.
Okay, banana nose.
And a chocolate chip cookie. What's your new nose? One.
I think I have to go with the carton because most of those will degrade.
Well, here's the thing.
It doesn't degrade.
Chocolate chip cookie, because the chocolate chip cookie will be pretty fine for a long time. The milk is going to spoil in the carton.
Oh, well, you're going to remove the carton from the milk, dummy.
He grafts and splices it into your body so that the living cells merge with yours so the food won't go bad.
Okay, so hold on. That because like if I'm going to have a weird nose, maybe I should go with banana nose and be like a One Piece character.
I think I might go banana nose.
I hate bananas.
Ooh.
Bananas smell nice too. Like I
like the smell of bananas.
They smell so sweet and good. I don't know, man. I'm gonna go with banana nose if I'm guaranteed that it doesn't rot. How easy is it to like destroy this new nose?
It says it becomes as durable as normal human flesh, but it looks exactly like a banana.
Okay, yeah, banana.
Whenever I hadn't thought of a hypothetical before time, so I was kind of freestyling now.
That was good considering your last 2 freestyles. That was very good.
Right, I need to go because my head exploded.
Bye, Bradley.
I don't know anyone. Bye, Brad. Well, are you still there?
I'm still here. And you know what else is here? Chekhov's fucking Flamethrower.
Yeah!
Yeah! That's the podcast title, by the way.
Welcome to the freaking Utah cast.
Freaking you cast, baby. Okay. All right, let's get into spoilers. We're going to rewind. We were talking about Sharon Tate, right?
Yes.
I feel like this movie has 2 stories. One is the story of Rick and Cliff and their friendship. which is exemplified by the line, "More than a brother, but a little less than a wife," which
Yeah.
I thought was a really sweet line. I really appreciate that Tarantino was able to show like this healthy male bond relationship without like having to make it too macho, with making it very organic.
There's a great scene that's like I think right before the time skip that I think really exemplifies that, and that's when they drive up, and Rick is like, "Hey man, my FBI special's about to come on. You want to watch it with me?" He's like, "Hey man," and Cliff's like, "Yeah, dude, I didn't expect anything less. I brought some beer. Let's order some pizza. And let's sit down and watch this thing."
That's one of the best scenes in the movie.
Yeah,
The camera
and
just focuses on the screen as they just riff to the movie. It just felt so good.
yeah, and you're like you get this idea of like, oh, they are actually like best buds.
Yeah.
Um,
And their relationship is weird because there's a lot of give and take and it's not quite balanced, but they understand each other. They understand what they
understand
need.
where the person's coming from. Like
Yeah.
they get that like, oh hey, I understand Rick. His whole important thing is, you know, uh, Rick's thing is that he wants to be this movie star, and that's a big important thing to him. So I'm gonna respect him for that. And Rick kind of also understands that Cliff just needs work to do work because
Yeah.
that's what Cliff does. Like,
So we're gonna touch this back in a second, right? So that's
Yeah.
one half of the story, and it's a wonderful story. There's the actual story points are spread out enough to where audiences might think it's slow, but I think it goes. If you map out like every single scene is important to build that climax with them, right?
yeah,
So the Sharon Tate stuff, which is disconnected from that story pretty much completely.
mm-hmm.
She serves a couple of purposes. So the second story Tarantino is trying to tell here is the story of saving Sharon Tate's life. What will the world be like if this tragedy didn't happen to someone that I look up to? He clearly respects and appreciates her very much, to where all of her scenes are there to build her personality without getting too deep with it. I felt like it was really, really tasteful, where all the real characters were there. They had some quirks about them, but they weren't ever super portrayed to where Quentin Tarantino could fit that much personality into them, aside from like small things, small ways to encapsulate those characters, basically. Where Sharon Tate, he sees her as this like really nice, friendly lady.
Yeah.
Um,
Like she's portrayed in this movie as like a goddess of Hollywood or like a saint or someone like an idol. Like
there's reverence to her.
yes.
But it's not like she's like plot armory famous, because
She's not.
she's a up and coming star, first of all. She is someone who has a certain lack of also in unconfidence. She wants to go into this movie and see people react to her.
Yeah, she's very innocent. She's very naive. Like
Yeah.
she's new to this whole thing, and she's just like, she's kind of like the successful hippie, like the one that was able to make it. Like she's very free loving and free going,
Yeah.
and like wants to be friends with everyone. Like she has her ex fiance come over to her house all the time because she just wants to keep him
Best
in his
friends.
life.
I feel
yeah.
like she's a huge foil to Rick, where Rick's stardom is fading, and you get the snapshot of a rising star and how much more in her zone she is than Rick is, and how nice she is. She picks up the hippie for nothing. She's buying a present for her husband for nothing, you know?
And like you get the idea of like what you understand now, like what Rick is missing, like why
Yeah.
he wants to go back to that evergreen, and like it's like I miss the time where I could go into my theater and like listen to everyone laugh or like yell and be excited for what's happening, and kind of be in that limelight and know what it was like to like go back there and be innocent and be part of that whole experience again. And he's like chasing after it because once you get older, it's hard to like one up yourself over and over again.
Yeah, and it's like that scene of her in the theater is some of the most heart in like cinema. Like it's just so cute. And all of this is showing you another side of Hollywood, right? It's showing you the successful side. It's showing you the well-established side of Hollywood, to show you that other snapshot of it. It's showing you an innocent woman caught in this. And it's not related to the main story, but it's all there to build that tension for an event that never happens in this film.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of brilliant, Like,
Yeah,
um,
it's very Glorious,
this it's very what?
Glorious Bastards. Where
Yeah,
it's
it is. But like he did something special with this one as opposed to Inglorious, where like I don't know, you're trying to save someone and just the innocence of her and the tension build up to her inevitable death because there's another thing that people dislike about this movie that was super intentional, I think. Um
Mhm.
and that was the narration that kicks in late into the movie. And I think I've talked to you a little bit about this where that
Yeah,
narration, it was there in the beginning a little bit and it shows that there's a big jump and it shows up again and people are like, "Oh man, that's lazy." First of all, if we didn't have time to see all of their Italian venture, I think the end goal of it was what Quentin was really trying to get at. But
hmm
the most important part of it is that the narration starts getting real factual and it starts getting real matter of fact.
yeah,
And it starts priming you to get ready for what you've been waiting the whole movie for. And it's like, oh wait, we're getting back to reality. And it made me even forget that Quentin Tarantino ever did Inglorious at that moment because I was like, oh, they're gonna either do a thing where the hippies kill Rick and then Tate's family. They're gonna do a thing where they kill Rick brutally and then that spares Tate. So you're setting up for like, oh man, how is it gonna involve this inevitable fate of some family dying horribly? How
hmm
is that? How is it gonna involve these made up characters? And that is used for the biggest subversion of the movie.
yeah. Because I remember you told me to look him up, and I read everything that happened to Sharon Tate. I was like, because I know Quentin Tarantino, and he has extremely violent
Oh
movie
yeah,
scenes, and I was just like, I really, really don't want to see this because like they're the like looking at it, it's just horrific. Like,
it
like
is some of the most fucked up stuff.
yeah, and
And I didn't want to tell you. I could tell like immediately that was you and Bradley Sphere, but I also didn't want to go to. You can't tell someone it's like, but it doesn't happen
yeah.
because the anticipation building to it is so important for that first viewing.
hmm and even if you, it's and like what's great about this ending too is that even if you don't know about the Sharon Tate murders, you still kind of like it still leads to a very satisfying conclusion for the story that's being told. It's just the Sharon Tate part of it adds this kind of fantasy element to the story being told. If
Yeah,
that makes
it's like if you don't know about Sharon Tate, then you're gonna miss that third of the theme of the ending. But you're
yeah,
still gonna get this fun ending for Rick and Cliff, where Cliff gets to show how badass he is, and Rick gets to be a true cowboy and do something heroic in his real life as opposed to on the screen.
yeah, uh,
Oh,
and like the ending bit where like there are a few other scenes I want to talk about before we talk about the
let
ending.
okay. You want to back it up because yeah, I want to talk about the ending. Let's back it up
The,
then.
I want to talk about the portion where, well, I guess there's really kind of three scenes. There's a Bruce Lee scene. There's
Mm-hmm.
shooting the cowboy movie, and like the scenes that all those are together. And then there's the Western scene, like the actual Western scene.
Right. Oh man, let's do it. Let's go in that order then. I think it goes in that order because we talked about Leo talking with the director guy.
hmm
Um,
Yeah.
so we
We
can
we
jump
go
into
Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee. Yes,
There.
lead us.
Yeah. So um, I guess like a quarter through the movie, Rick goes off and is doing a and is going to go do his movie shoot or TV shoot, and basically tells Cliff like, "Hey, I don't think you're going to be able to work on this shoot because this guy that you know is working on it. And y'all don't have a good relationship, so you might as well not try. And let's not worry about it." Cliff's like, "Yeah, okay," and he goes back to Rick's place to fix his antenna. And while he's there,
By the way, the flamethrower is in the shed, which I didn't realize.
oh, is it? Okay.
Yes, very good.
That is good, really good. But he goes back and then he's fixing the antenna and he thinks back to the time that he pissed off this dude that he can't work with anymore. And you're kind of like taken aback because you think he's like back at the movie shoot or
Right.
something.
It happens so suddenly that you think he drove back up there and forced himself to be in.
Yeah,
And something's not setting right because you just heard about what Leo was going to be wearing and how it was going to emasculate his look. But
yeah,
then you get back and he's just in a tuxedo and you're like, "Wait, what?"
yeah. You're very confused, and I think that's part of the point.
Yes.
But anyways, so eventually, like you kind of find out that Cliff is accused of killing his wife and got away with it.
Which is
And-
very ambiguous, which is cool.
yeah, and then finally after some disagreements, it's the gaffer, I think, that he's talking to.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Kurt Russell.
Yeah, Kurt Russell. Kurt Russell's like, fine, we'll take him. He'll be on here, but you can't cause any shit. And Leo's like, yes.
And don't get near my wife. She really doesn't like you, man.
Yeah, and so they go off, and Cliff is hanging out with all the other stuntmen there and stunt coordinators, and one of them is I forget what the actor's name is, something Cho.
But it's Bruce fucking Lee.
Yeah, it's supposed to be Bruce Lee, and Bruce Lee's telling the story about how he could like beat up Cassius Clay and everything, and Cliff's not having any of it, and so they challenge each other to like a friendly duel basically, and the way this is shot is so fucking great.
It's all one shot. It's really cool.
Yeah, and it feels like a fighting game that you're watching almost.
Oh yeah,
it's shot and it's framed and it feels like it's so well choreographed. But it's a great way to show that Cliff is actually a fucking badass, and he's such a badass he almost beat Bruce Lee.
It was a really important scene actually. That was another. This movie has so many Chekhov's guns, where one of them is Chekhov's kung fu training that we see in this scene. How did you feel about Bruce Lee's portrayal? Because some people are mad at it.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about Bruce Lee, so it's kind of like all I know personally about Bruce Lee is that he was in a lot of movies. He did a lot of kung fu stuff, and he died at a relatively young age.
But what I have heard is that like Bruce Lee was a humble guy, but I have heard, I think I read somewhere that, and people please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm interested in this topic. That Bruce Lee was one to like kind of get in fun spars with the people he was working with. And like you gotta also understand that I feel like this scene is like deliberately being mistold. It is a flashback that is embezzled by the person looking back on it.
Yeah.
Where when he chucks Bruce Lee, he fucking shatters that car.
Yeah.
And it's like I feel like that's one of the things.
Yeah. Like, it looks like he got punched by an anime character when he gets thrown into that car.
It was big anime. It was like we were watching Kill Bill for a second.
Yeah.
The most anime. And
like, the car breaks and it sounds cartoony too. Like, it's...
And he's doing like jumping flying kicks and shit. So it's like pretty intense, right? So there's some fiction and there's some truth there. But there's also this element of Bruce Lee has like some really small cameos later on where he's training with the Polanskis. He's training with
Sharon Tate.
He's training with Sharon Tate and Polanski. What's Polanski's first name? Roman Polanski. And he just seems like a supporting teacher, like a really good kung fu instructor. So it's like, you know what, like they made a portrayal of Bruce Lee, and overall it wasn't like super, like it wasn't exclusively negative. They showed some like brief moments of him just being a cool dude, so it was fine with me. Anyways, that scene's hilarious.
Yeah. I like the way that he's talking in the cadence, and there's the shot of the best joke in there is like, if I killed you with my hands because they're lethal weapons, be considered murder. And it goes back to Cliff, and he's like, killing anybody is considered murder.
Killing anybody's manslaughter, and I mean, he's familiar potentially. Yeah. And I like when like Bruce Lee's like hiya, and he's like hiya, he's like mocking him,
and like Cliff is just like gay.
Very fun. And then all of that is just building for like a 2-line punchline where it flashes back to Cliff, and you realize you're in a flashback. He's like, well, you know what, fair enough. Oh man, just the boldness to have a 5-minute joke build up.
Yeah,
really good, man.
But like it's crucial to establish like who Cliff is. Like, Cliff doesn't want to take shit from anybody, but he doesn't want to really start shit either.
But like, if you start shit, he can finish it. Yeah,
that's the whole point, is that he's a laid back dude and he just wants to mind his own business. But as soon as you get into his business, he gets pissed off.
Let's skip a scene here and talk about Cliff's other big scene on that train, because I feel like that directly feeds into his story with the ranch, which actually starts on the streets where he's seeing Margaret Qualley, Pussycat or whatever on the streets. By the way, very seductive young lady. She's 22, so that's okay to say.
Yeah. Thank God.
The hippie armpits weren't even like a super deal breaker. That's how cute she was.
Oh man, that deal broke me. I was like, nope, I'm done.
Yeah, no, it was hard. I was like, oh man,
I mean,
why'd she gotta be a hippie though?
that's like a full fur patch.
Oh,
Like,
it
it
was,
was like,
I mean, there goes the hippie demographic of this podcast. But
yeah,
more respect to her. She's super playful. She's super seductive, and I feel like that's part of like trying to get people to the ranch to see how many people she can convert.
incredibly forward too.
Yeah,
Well,
just trying to suck cocks,
yeah,
dick sucking girlfriend, as Joe says.
yeah, and then,
Yep.
yeah. It's a hard situation to be in. No pun intended.
Cliff was a very powerful man, being able to say no.
Yeah, and you get this idea. It's like, yeah, he wants it, but as soon as he's like, I can't trust this person. Like, that's a huge deal.
Yeah.
Like, she's like, okay, you're not willing to tell me your name. I can't really trust you. Or like, not your name.
I've avoided jail so far, and you're not going to be the one who gets me in there.
Yeah, and you're like, okay, you're someone that I should be cautious of. He gets to the ranch, and he's just like,
that ranch scene builds up so nicely.
And
he steps out. So, like Joe said, this scene's a Western.
yeah,
He steps out of the car. You're already getting these wide shots of him looking out to where he used to work, and you can already get this sense of like nostalgia.
It also starts off like a very Western shot.
Yeah.
Because whenever like the gunslinger or whoever comes to town, it usually starts low underneath the horse, and you see them come out and like jump off their horse, and you just see their boots as they walk up to the town. That's like the most stereotypical cowboy shot.
And as you're walking out, the locals are popping out and they're glaring at you. And so he introduces. They all group up around him. They're trying to see what he's all about. Tex is introduced. So Tex is like a actual like human being who is a big part of the Tate murders.
Yeah.
I mean, he even shows up later in the movie, and so that's supposed to be a big deal, like a big deal if you know. Also, the more you know about the story, the more tense the scene is. I didn't know about this at the time, but one of the first murders in this whole big string of murders was a stuntman at the ranch. So
I didn't know that.
People watching the movie would have had a heightened sense of tension because, like, oh, they're replacing that story with Cliff. I thought Cliff was gonna die. Tarantino is no stranger to killing main characters.
Yeah.
He killed John Travolta midway through that movie. Like he kills
like half the bastards class before even half the movie was done.
Joe, have you seen Django?
I haven't.
Oh man, we gotta watch Django. That's my favorite. Spoiler alert, that's my favorite movie, actually. Period.
After seeing Leo do his whole cowboy thing, I was like, man, I gotta really watch Django.
Oh, Django used to be my favorite role from him, and now it's like tied. That's how good he was in that as well. So Cliff is there. He goes to confront Squeaky, who's also another real person. This scene is fucking what a villain! What a villain for a Western to have this unbending hippie chick just be like this horrifying tension building villain. It really goes to show I don't know, just the kind of inversion of the West that this movie is thematically trying to tell. There's a lot of layers to look at this movie from, and I feel like that there's definitely some of that going on.
Yeah. Telling you, man, redhead's no good.
I don't know about that, man. Kim Possible.
That's the one exception. But like it does a great job in like this build up, and like you said, there's a lot of tropes that are being played here, like
the Dutch angles, the close-ups.
The Dutch angles one was really kind of there. It really like it's like, wow, someone actually used a Dutch angle, like very good this time,
tastefully.
Like, yeah, tastefully done, and you get this sense of unnerve, and like it builds up because you get to the colony and everyone's like, yeah, whatever, they're talking to him, they're having a good time, but like you get that first shot of the inside of the house, and like it's moving, and like you just hear like a voice from somewhere in there.
Right. And so the diegetic audio, like the audio coming from the world, was really well used in this scene because as he's like in the house and he's moving through, just the TV shows in the back, and it's just adding the sense of spookiness.
Yeah, but but then like what I was getting at was, so they keep cutting back to this house, like where Squeaky and like all the other hippies are like just chilling out watching TV.
Yeah.
Every time they cut back, they have not moved at all. It's nerve-wracking.
And Squeaky's just like, as soon as he starts coming over, you got to tell me.
Yeah.
It's like, what is this girl gonna do?
and you know immediately like they've done this before. They know what it's like.
Yep.
That's why they're so calm and not nervous or anything. But you still feel this tension, this edge.
That's a good point. Like their calmness too,
Mhm.
and then the calmness of her letting go see
George
George Spawn
Spawn,
or something.
yeah. And like
Um,
there's another part during this too that's really cool that really emphasizes the cowboy walking to the bandit town where like he's up on the porch and you can see like the rest of the street down and everyone's like lined up like blocking his path to get away.
yeah, really, really cool. Um, so he sees George. It's a complete deflation of the tension where he's like, "Oh, she's fucking me and taking care of me. She's okay." True
Yeah.
story, by the way. That's how they stayed at the ranch, apparently.
Yeah. Like,
So
get the fuck out of here. I don't even know who you are.
Tarantino loves to undercut climaxes, and that was definitely one of those.
Mhm.
And the one thing I would remove from this movie, the one scene is when he's back at the car. He beats up that guy for a while, and then he has him fix his car. I wouldn't have had them call Tex because it didn't really lead to anything. Like he's out of there before Tex can get there.
No, I think that's important.
Mm,
I think it does because then it kind of it builds on like when Tex breaks into the house and he realizes who Cliff is because he's like the guy that got away kind of deal that he wasn't that spat on his family kind of deal.
Cliff recognized Tex more than the opposite though. So I don't know.
Yeah, but I feel like I still like that scene though because you get that shot of the girl getting on the horse and it's a great juxtaposition too because so when they get to the ranch they are they have this side job where they take tourists out on like the horse trails and they go right around the horses.
Mm-hmm.
You're like okay whatever and like and backing up from that Pussycat's talking about you know how actors in Hollywood are fake and they're not real people and they put on a show.
Ooh, right.
And so then when they're like go get Tex and the girl gets on the horse and she rides off she goes and gets Tex and she's like Tex you gotta go back blah 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 it's like and Tex rides off and she immediately flips and like
Into the role. Yeah, because she's like, and Tex is like, God damn it. And she just immediately flips into like this, here we go. I'm going to lead y'all now.
yeah and like and it's just horrifying because they're manipulating people and they're lying to themselves and to everyone around them and it really emphasizes like how it's just a small little thing that helps build
Yeah.
that like
I guess the part I would actually remove is how long he's punching that guy. He like punches him 4 times in slow-mo. I was like, oh, that's a bit much.
yeah but still it's a Tarantino movie
Yeah.
and
I
he's
mean,
like
there's some Tarantino-isms where you could cut back on. I feel like everything else added to something, but the 4 punches were like, maybe it adds to Cliff's brutality, but like I feel like the brutality wasn't Cliff's, it was Tarantino's near the end there. You know what? You know what? That's what it is. He beat that guy up 4 times because that is Tarantino's rage.
yeah
Okay, all right, I'm turned around.
and I like how like Brad Pitt's just like fix it. It's not a it's just such a matter of the fact and like the great way to if you're a big weeb is say like Cliff in this movie is basically just stuntman Jotaro in the way he acts.
Yeah,
he's just like I'm gonna kick your fucking ass.
that's
And
part. He's part 6 Jotaro. That's who he
yeah
is.
he is. And like I just like I'm tired and it really emphasizes it goes back to that whole part where like you know if this was Cliff's car Cliff probably would have just gotten in the car and driven.
But he's like, this is my boss's car.
Yeah. And it's like I can't have this happening, so I need you to fix it.
One last thing of this scene I want to mention: when Cliff steps out of the house, the shot that we see is probably what fully sold me that this Cliff being a cowboy angle is super intentional, and it's that, and so is this hippies versus Hollywood versus the West kind of thing, where it's Pussycat standing in the location where an antagonist of a Western would be. And the camera pans up from her feet to her legs to her hips, where her hand is next to her hip, where she has like a hippie pouch, which is what they're called, I guess. And it's just there, like she's reaching for a pistol.
Yeah.
And it makes it so abundantly clear, looking back on it, that this is the plight of the cowboy versus the new antagonist of the West. Mm-hmm. And it's completely shot like a Western.
Yeah. It's so
wow. Good. Layers, man. There's so many lenses to look at this movie from, which is why I definitely want to watch it again.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you get the scene of him walking away and like everyone like yelling at the town, like trying to run him out of town and everything.
Mm-hmm. Classic stuff.
Yeah. It's that scene is like top tier, top 5 scenes probably from me. like just in the way it's shot and it's tense and it's so good.
Let's talk. So we're gonna talk about probably my favorite scenes of the movie, aside from the ending. Leo stuff at the movie.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on here. Right off the bat, he meets this young up and coming actor.
Also, he's filming a TV show, not a movie.
Right, it's a pilot for a TV show.
Yeah.
And so one interesting thing when he's talking to his co-star, his co-star's life is going great. He is who Leo used to be. That's him.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell he starts it off by looking up to Leo. And he's talking to him, and he's droning on, and there's these very intentional cuts to show us that the conversation's going, and it's getting to Leo. Another interesting interaction between them is when they're talking about getting the lead role to The Great Escape. I love that scene, because as soon as he mentions it, a music cue kicks in, and Leo's face drops.
Mm-hmm.
And as the conversation is going, Leo's like, man, I never had a chance. It was no big deal. 4 other people were ahead of me. But as the conversation is going, it keeps showing Leo in that role.
Mm-hmm.
I think to show that like he can so well visualize himself in that role, but possibly that he also rehearsed so much for that role that he can perfectly see himself in it. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh man, this is what could have been. And every second I talk to this guy is like another dagger in my stomach as I realize I wasn't in this role.
To him, it's this big missed window of opportunity. Like to him, he was robbed of a great role.
And that is such a fun way to show that, where it just keeps cutting back to it, and he's just doing the role perfectly. Just a lot of clever ways to show people your mindset. A good thing about Rick is how honest he is. Like right off the bat, like he's honest with his feelings as soon as he's done meeting with the Italian director. Like he's very aware of where he is in life, and he's aware of his issues too. He just doesn't know how to conquer them.
Yeah, and I think backing up, I think before that happens, he gets on set and he's like waiting for like his mustache to dry or whatever, and he runs into the little girl.
Right. This scene,
actor or whatever.
This scene made me cry almost.
Yeah.
And there's a specific reason why. But in this scene, he meets the little girl. She is just this huge method actor. Where even Leo's like, "How old are you?" She's like 8. It's like, what is wrong? You're so dedicated. Mm-hmm. And they're just chilling, reading books. And at first, she doesn't like Leo's company or Cliff's or Rick's company, but like she warms up to it. And they start talking about this book that Rick is reading, and it's such a thesis statement for this movie. He's talking about this book with a cowboy called Easy Breezy, and Easy Breezy used to be the best cowboy in the land, but he took an arrow to the knee, rather to the hip, and he just don't work so good anymore. Like his words exactly, and he's just fallen off, and he's just plummeting in relevance as a cowboy. And as Leo's reading this, the little girl's already getting sad, and Leo starts to come terms with like his true emotions, because he's introspective like that throughout the movie, but like it's really hitting him how much he's relating to Easy Breezy. And like he's just crying, and I'm in the theater like feeling really bad, because if there's 2 fears that are like comprised of my soul, I have 2 fears, and they're both internalized by Quentin Tarantino characters. One of them is Jackie Brown, which I think I talked about last podcast, and her fear of running out of time. You can only restart so many times before you've run out of time and chances to restart and not getting anywhere in life. That's one of them. And this one is just been also relevant these days where, okay, you've worked hard in your life and you achieved something, but what if you're not good enough to keep it? And like how crushing that is. And watching Leo go through that, like I'm not even in my late 20s, and that was already like a midlife crisis moment. I was like, oh man, this moment, I really needed to see this right now. Yeah. So good.
And then it's great because it talks about like it really it delves into that existential career kind of thing that everyone I think goes through everyone like in their life. Like, what am I doing? Where's my career going? Like, what does it mean to me? And like where can I excel in my career? And like that's the first half of this whole like segment for him. And then you have this intermission of him. And then we have the scene a little bit later. I can't remember the exact like pacing of everything. I think it's after the conversation with the new lead, where it's the first scene of the bar, and like it's a one shot take, and they're going through everything, and like Leo is doing really good. He's killing it, and then like halfway through he starts stumbling, and he like keeps on stumbling and stumbling and stumbling the
The way
entire
that
time.
scene is shot is so cool too. It's like pseudo fourth wall breaking, where you're in the camera's view, and then when he messes up, the camera reverses to where it's supposed to be. That scene is so cool. It's one of my favorites in the movie.
Well, like and like you hear all this like dialogue from like the script taker and director, and like it's off screen, so you
Yeah,
kind of like you're
you're
still
still immersed in the movie, but it's breaking that movie's fourth wall.
yeah, and like it's great. I love in this movie that Tarantino is okay with just people talking off screen and like letting us just figure out who it is and understand what they're trying to do, and not cutting back to them back and forth.
He
And
does a lot of that in this movie with the FBI scene too.
yeah,
Um,
and it's really important because it kind of shows you that like Leo is like how focused everyone is in the moment while they're filming this. Like
yeah,
they are in this town.
they are fucking professionals, man.
Yeah, they are doing this job. And the fact that Leo is shouting to someone off screen and not in frame is so jarring. That's how it feels for everyone else in that situation right now.
And his co-lead, whose name I'll never remember, just looks so awkward throughout it all. I was like, dude, you're supposed to be a professional. Get it together. And
Yeah.
a little character quirk we haven't mentioned about Leo that's been there the whole movie is when he's kind of nervous, when he's just talking normally, he has a bit of a stutter. But when he has confidence in his acting, the stutter is completely gone.
Yeah.
And they never point it out. It's just something that comes out, and it starts coming out in that scene as he's messing up.
Yeah, and it happens. He messes up like 2-3 times, I think, during the scene. And you kind of like, and then they're kind of like, okay, that was good job, that was what we needed, great. And then he goes back to his trailer and he has his fucking fit.
That fit is so hilarious and dark and
Yeah.
just perfect. That was improvised, by the way. Just
Oh, was
completely.
it?
Yeah.
Nice. And then,
Tarantino liked it so much he kept it.
yeah, he just keeps on throwing shit. And at one point, you're an alcoholic, you're never gonna drink again. And he grabs the flask to take a drink. He's like, what the fuck?
He tosses it out. I'm gonna blow your brains out tonight if you don't do this.
Yeah.
It's like, Jesus, why am I laughing? It was
The best shot during that. You say it's improv, but I think it's hard to do that. But he's talking to a mirror, but the mirror is directly positioned to where when he's talking to it, the reflection is directly.
Man, I think that is just a work of God right there. Like it's I think it's all improv. That's what they said.
And so he's just like directly like referring like almost a motivational speech to you
Yeah.
to get your shit together.
I mean, we've all been there where we're like, man, what the fuck did I do last night? Why am I so dumb?
like why did I do that? Why did
Yeah.
I have eight?
Why did I have eight whiskey sours? You couldn't stop at 3. You had to have 8.
Yeah.
Oh
but then,
man.
I think then at that point it cuts away to the Cliff Cowboy scene.
Right. And
And
then we finally come back to the Leo final scene in this section.
And he's getting up from his trailer. He's like going through his lines one more time, and like you go through this entire shot of like this big villainous moment, I guess, of the pilot or something, and he like kills it.
That's like Oscar worthy performance. I know it's cliche to say, but oh my god.
Yeah, and like
That's the kind of shit you see in Django, by the way. Like that's why we gotta watch Django next after Kill Bill 2.
yeah, and he just kills it. And like the big thing about this is like the it cuts and it pans away and you see all the crew there and they're looking at them. They're like, oh, and the director comes over and says, oh man, great job, that was wonderfully improvised, that was amazing, oh, you were so good. And like even the girls just like, hey,
That was the
like,
best acting I've ever seen.
yeah. And it kind of shows to him, he realizes like he can like be great again.
That was such an uplifting scene, and like, God, he was incredible in it. He starts immediately getting teary eyes as soon as cut is called. Like he was putting his all into it.
Yeah, and he realizes like, to him like being an actor is just being a good actor, and like he's gonna prove to everyone that he can be a great actor that way.
Which transitions us directly into the last act, which starts with the Italian trip. When they get back, he's got a hot new wife. She's very fun. And let's wrap this up by talking about the finale, the last 20 minutes of this movie.
I think we start out because like we talked about this before. It starts going through this narration.
Yeah.
And so it's really kind of just basic. Like, here's what Sharon Tate and her friends were doing up until this night.
With timestamps to really set it in stone.
Yeah, and then like you kind of figure out, and then like, Oh, also before this whole thing happens, Cliff and Rick have a conversation where Rick is like, "Hey man, where things are changing.
Our
I
t-
have a wife now. We're gonna move. We're gonna sell the house, but I think I can't. I'm not gonna hire you as a service anymore just because of the way that things are shifting."
And I
Basically,
mean, Cliff's sad, but he takes it well. He just sips his drink, and they're like, you know what, bud? Let's have one last big drink off before we get into this new stage of our life.
yeah, like it's a big transitional moment where like Rick is just like, we're coming to a point now where we just have to split ways and we have to move on and like grow in our own direction, which is also really kind of empathetic because everyone's goes through that, especially after college and like
Yeah.
after and everything. Like you just have to part ways with the people that are close to you, and it sucks. Um, but it kind of like goes and they go out and have this big night. They get shit faced at them at the Mexican place.
Very fun. Take
Um,
a cab home.
take a cab home, and they get there, and Brad Pitt goes to walk his dog Brandy and smokes an acid laced cigarette.
The Chekhov cigarette.
Yeah, which was set up in the FBI section, like
Yeah, a while ago.
yeah, um,
But
and
then,
so what, to me, the like you say like, and so you get this tension, at the start when they start doing this timestamp thing. But for me, the part where it gets really tense, like the tension really ramps up, is when you see the shitty car come up in with the hippies.
yep. And four of them are in there. One of them is Tex. Some of the others were in the ranch. And
Well,
Uma Thurman's daughter's in there.
yeah,
She's also in Stranger Things season 3. She is fantastic. Um, and she ditches them as they're like. So they pull up first of all, and hilariously, an angry, drunk, narcissistic Rick comes out and is like, "Get these fucking hippies out of my lawn!" He's chugging a whole pitcher of margarita. What a fucking icon!
my obviously I went to see this with my parents. My mother was sitting next to me, and when she realized who these were, she's like, "Oh no, oh no, oh no!" And she's like holding on tight. 'Cause it's like it's such hilarious tension,
Yes,
where you're just like, "Oh my god, this is hilarious," because Rick doesn't realize these people have come to murder
his
someone.
neighbors.
Yeah, his neighbors, and they could easily murder him, but he's just pissing and yelling at them the entire time.
And they pull out a gun. I'm like, oh, is this like so much could go wrong? There's so much
Yeah.
tension building, and it's just also hilarious at the same time.
And he's like, "We just gotta turn around." I was like, "Back the fuck up!"
Oh man, so they back up, and for a second there, you think everything's okay, but the crazy one is like, these fucking actors, they grew us up, they taught us how to kill, so let's fucking kill them.
Well, there's a really important thing I think that has to happen right before this. So there have been hints and notes of this throughout the entirety of the movie about Rick, and that people grew up watching his show. Like people know who he is. Like they know what bounty law is, and like what they know. Like
The hippies knew who he was.
yeah, and that's like a huge moment. Like, and they kind of get a starstruck moment. Like, oh my god, John K. Riley just yelled at us.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome,
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
And like they're starstruck, and then like and play it's important at the very end of this movie, I feel. But yeah, then the crazy Asian girl, it's like, they taught us to murder. Let's go kill them all, as like a sign of rebellion or some crazy high hippie shit.
Yeah.
And then Uma Thurman's daughter runs away.
Yep. Good for her. I wouldn't like to see her die.
Yes, because she realized like these people are crazy.
Yeah. She's like,
And then-
I left my knife in the car. She fucking bails. In real life, she just waited at the car.
Yeah.
That person.
And then going back to the cowboy motif, they come walking up like a bunch of bandits.
Yeah, that is that shot. So like the tension goes down, and then that shot happens, and it starts shooting back up.
Yeah, and by this time, Cliff has like just about made it home.
And he's tripping balls.
Yeah, and what I love about this movie that Quentin Tarantino does, and this is also to like Brad Pitt's like acting effort, is you don't see anything Brad Pitt's seeing.
Yeah, it's so easy to go that route, but it's also so easy to like not do it well, I guess, where it just looks cheesy and weird.
Yeah. So but like Brad Pitt really killed it. It really sold the whole high thing, and kind of like it wasn't overly campy, and it was just believable enough. Like, okay, yeah, he's pretty fucking out of it, man.
It's already Cliff's personality, but now like in his weird state of mind. It was still very much on character.
Yeah. And you get to the point where and so like Cliff is there. He's trying to feed Brandy and whatnot, and they bust him down the door. Uh, I think it's Squeaky, the redheaded girl, comes. No, she comes
No,
from the front
Squeaky's
door.
not there.
No,
I don't.
yes, she is. She's the redhead.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
They bust through the door, and the girl comes around through the side, comes through the side door, and
So
Cliff is tripping out.
what's extra scary about that scene is that I think it's a recreation of what happened at the actual murders. Even so far to sending someone to go get a wife out of a bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, oh no, they're gonna be the replacement deaths, or they're going to be an additional casualty.
Yeah.
That is until Cliff motherfucking I forget Cliff's last name, but that motherfucker, man.
He uses his stand, Brandy, you a fine girl, and and sends him the after text and gets the gun out of his hand.
You just get the most awkward, hilarious, uncomfortable, brutal beatdown.
Yeah.
And it's magical. It is like Quentin Tarantino has always had a saying about like violence in movies is not the same as violence in real life. Violence in movies is fun and cathartic and weird and uncomfortable. And it's like I don't think he's ever shown this as well as he did this film.
And especially like because it's really to emphasize the point of like it releases that tension for the audience. Like we're killing the bad guys and they're getting their just rewards.
Not only are we killing them, we're killing them super hard, but also these people were terrible. This is Quentin's revenge years after. This is the only way he can express his rage.
Basically.
Yeah. Which is why I feel like Hollywood being like a setting and like a character in this movie, like it's this crazy, insane story that can only happen in a once upon a time story in Hollywood.
Yeah, like it's a fairy tale about. But yeah, you have this crazy beatdown, like where Cliff is like ramming this girl's head into the side of the fireplace,
like 5 times more rams than he needed. Like it was just gloriously horrible.
The guy getting his balls ripped off by Brandy. The fucking wife even participates and like punches the redhead.
She
got
off easy.
Yeah, and then she ran away to her room.
And the Asian girl, who's apparently like extra bad in real life, she gets it super bad.
Yeah,
where she gets her face smashed in by a can, and then oh my god, this last scene is so fucking funny.
It's hard to describe it and give it like exact like it's just rewards because it's so good and so well done.
It's a zombie pops out. Oh man, okay. So Rick is just chilling, listening to the radio in his pool, and a fucking undead zombie with a gun.
By the way, with his margarita.
Yeah, just having a good time. Just pops out through the window into his pool. He yells, "What the fuck?" And she's shooting into the air, and he's awkwardly swimming out of the pool, and she's just kind of flailing in there. Like the biggest flail. Like I'm talking, there's a scene in Kill Bill 2 that is very reminiscent of this. And Rick goes into the shed, and for a second you're like, what is he doing? He comes out with a fucking flamethrower, man.
At the very beginning of the movie.
And he torches her immediately, super casually.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Chekhov's flamethrower.
There's nothing really here in symbolism other than just revenge and pure kind of tension relief in this situation.
There's also like he gets to be the big badass hero in real life.
He gets to have his own like gunslinger story basically.
Yeah. And like we move on from all that. Cliff took a wound to the hip, also tying him into Easy Breezy.
It's a really minor stab wound.
Yeah.
But this brings to the conclusion of both of our stories that we've kind of been telling about the fading star and like the relationship between these two, where Cliff is like getting into like the hospital bed and putting him in the back of the ambulance and everything, and Rick is also being interrogated by the police. And there's a great scene with the Italian wife being interrogated, and she's so riled, she's just speaking off Italian the entire time.
And the guy's just taking it. The whole interrogation scene, hilarious. But then Roman Polanski comes down.
No. It's not Roman Polanski, but I don't want to get that to there yet. There's a scene, they're carting off Cliff, and Rick comes up to him and is like, man, let me come to the hospital with you. Let me, you saved my life, you saved my wife's life, whatever. And he's like, no, man, it's fine. It's good. I did what I needed to get done. You're like my best friend. Come see me tomorrow. get naked with your wife and whatever. Just like
My dog is there protecting y'all. Y'all be good.
take care of Brandy. She's probably a little riled. Make sure to feed her. And it really kind of solidifies that like they really do care for each other. They're not just business associates. And
I mean, their final line to each other,
yeah,
is you're a great friend.
yeah, and like I'll see you tomorrow, man. It's like, yeah, man, I'll see you tomorrow too. And like they just know they're going to see each other again. Like that,
Even though their professional career might not be the same,
yeah,
their friendship is for real, for real.
yeah. So like, and that like really solidifies like that whole story about them and like their how their lives are changing around them. But then we get to the end of Rick's kind of like story and fantasy of becoming of ascension essentially. So like after this point, everyone's pulled away, and Jay Serberg, who's like the hairdresser and
Right.
ex fiance, comes out and is like, "Hey man,
Everything
what's
cool?
happening? Yeah, like what's going on?" And like has sets up the best fucking joke in the movie.
Which one?
The like it's like, man, is everything all right? Like they go down there, they're talking about it, and you're like, and Leonardo DiCaprio's like, yeah, a bunch of fucking hippies came in and broke into my house. I don't know if they were trying to rob me or
I torched one.
yeah, I torched him. It's like, oh man, that's awful. Like, and explains like what happens and like how they got killed and everything. And he's like, man, is everyone all right? And he's like, well, not the fucking hippies, but yeah.
Oh man, and like they're just having this nice talk, and he recognizes him, and he's like, "Hey, my I guess ex-wife, she's a huge fan of yours." And Rick is like, "What the fuck? I've been looking up to these people like
Yeah.
gods."
It's a huge kind of moment for Rick because he realizes that like he kind of realizes he's had an impact on people that he now aspires or like it like looks up to.
Yeah,
And it's a huge cathartic moment for him because he's like, because
I made a mark.
yeah, like Jason's like, oh man, I know who you are. Like, you know, I know like Sharon talks about you all the time. And then Sharon comes on the intercom or whatever and starts talking to him, and he kind of realizes that like he's been intimidated by him, but she's also just been intimidated by her to him.
And when Sharon comes back, she sounds so sweet and caring and thoughtful, and you're just like, oh, she got to live in this universe. Like, that's so sweet.
Yeah. And it's a moment where like, and there's a great shot because it's literally like Rick lives next to them, but like he really just lives next to their driveway. And like there's a gate in front of it, and like it's literally the pearly great gates of heaven to him, like opening up, and like it's light at the top of the hill, and he walks up the hill to the light and everything, and like is able to like be among the gods as he sees of Hollywood at the time.
And in the early in the movie, another Chekhov's is he's like, man, if I could only get one pool party with Polanski, I'd be his next big star. And it's so far gone from the movie where it's like it seems like a far-fetched dream to everyone watching as well.
Yeah.
And he does it. Like the movie ends with them accepting him into their home, and his fading career is allegedly saved, and it's an unabashedly happy ending.
I think like the thing about Quentin Tarantino movies is that they're brutal and they're gory, but they're also like very happy movies. I feel like all the ones I've seen, more or less.
Yeah, you should watch a few more.
Yeah.
He has a good mix between like some kind of soul crushing endings as well.
Yeah, but like the point of this movie was not to be soul crushing. It's really kind of
quite the opposite. It's just a really good message. Once it didn't take until like the setting to like the title to kick in. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I was like, for me to realize, for it to like really click that I just watched a really fascinating fairy tale that could only take place in Hollywood.
That can only take place with these events.
Yeah, and that really blew me away. It elevated the movie into 5 out of 5 status at that point. Just retrospectively, it just made everything fit so well.
Yeah.
Love this movie. We talked about it for like probably the most we've talked about anything ever.
I just feel like Quentin Tarantino, like one, I was able to stay away from all this and like really pay attention. And two, it's always a lot to unpack, and it's just a new film to discuss and things to explore.
It was very artistic, and
artistic, but it was also not artistic, like overly artistic. Artistic in terms of like trying to like really go over your head. So
It wasn't that obtuse to where you couldn't have fun.
yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
there's like some other neat stuff to talk about. Like after Rick nails that scene, the style of directing shifts to more Tarantino like, where it's a lot
Yeah.
more confident, it's a lot more flamboyant, it's a lot more violent, it's a lot more narrative.
Mhm.
Very interesting. Where like you could kind of see some of the movie being Tarantino unsure if he still has it in him, and
Mhm.
then when Rick sees that he still has it in him, the style of directing gets more confident too. So even structurally, there's that going on.
That was something I noticed at the very beginning is that this doesn't feel very Tarantino from what I've seen.
This
Like,
movie was Jackie Brown meets Inglorious Bastards.
mhm.
If you're looking at,
I was talking to my father about this, and where I felt like this seems like a an improved version of Jackie Brown
yeah,
from like what you told me about and what you've told me about it.
yeah. I really like Jackie Brown when I watched it earlier this year,
Yeah.
so I was super into it. Joe, I think we're good.
Cool.
We
Great.
we did this movie justice. I'd say I can be proud of that
Yay.
one. All right, I gotta eat. I haven't had dinner. Bye, everyone.